Okay, I think we're ready to go. Now this system is a lot louder than the one in our Board of Ed headquarters. I'd like to call to order the Fairfield Public Schools Board of Education meeting for Tuesday, May 20th, 2014. And present is Mrs. Eileen Lou McCormick, Mr. John Convertito, Ms. Donna Carnell, Mrs. Jessica Gerber, myself, Philip Dwyer, Mr. Paul Fatterbean. We expect Mrs. Maxine Kennelly, she's at a school concert with her children, Mr. John Llewellyn, and Mr. Mark Patton. If we could all rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. For members of the public who have been coming to these board meetings for a long time but may have missed our discussion of the bylaws, you know that we have rearranged our agenda a little bit. I'll say that this is an experiment, although it's in the bylaws, so it's set. But we're saying that we will take public comment from people at the beginning of the meeting on non-voting items, so that you might be able to get home and not stay till 10:30, 11, 11:30, or 12, or whenever it is that we finish our business. We hope that this makes public participation a little bit easier, although it may make figuring out the timing of meetings a little bit more difficult, as we have presenters and whatnot, and when will they go on, depending on how many public speakers we have. So we're going to play it by ear until we get a system that seems to be working for both people. And then we also, you know that we, on a kind of a consistent basis, asked for unanimous consent to put the student reports up front. So we, by our bylaws, we moved the student reports up front, and then made a few other changes. So the agenda format and order of business is a little bit different, but fundamentally not much. So with that as an explanation, can I hear from the first and what appears to be the only student reporter?
Yeah, I guess I'm flying solo tonight. Hello again, and good evening. Within the past month, there have been several noteworthy accomplishments in Fairfield Ludlow High School. Yesterday, we held our annual Battle of the Houses competition, which features 3 houses, Webster, Warner, and Wright, in a series of relay races, tug of war, and 3-point shootout, and more. The SBAC exam is also starting up for juniors today and is scheduled to run until May 29th. On Friday, May 16th, juniors dress elegantly for their prom, and senior prom is scheduled for May 30th. Also, our boys tennis team clinched spots in both FCX and states yesterday with a 6-1 win over Darien, finishing the regular season 9-7. Amazingly, our girls team went 17-1 this season and are in a good position to win FCX, with their sole loss coming yesterday to Darien, 4-3. Boys baseball finished 12-6 and is primed for a deep run in the FCX tournament. Our softball team finished 13-3 this season, also earning them a spot in FCX. Our ultimate frisbee team, a newly founded club established this year, is ranked 5th in the state and is sending 3 players to an all-state tryout: Jordan Lane, Costin Leahy, and Billy Donatucci. As the end of the year draws near and with finals fast approaching, most of the senior class finds themselves ready to head off to their internships, which begin May 26th. Heading into the final month of the school year, Ludlow's student body is poised for success both in their finals and in their internships.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. King from Fairfield Ludlow High School? Any questions? Okay. You're welcome to stay till the end of the meeting, as we always invite you to, or to slip out quietly when we least notice you. Just before we go to public comment, Mr. Bill Sapone is here for the Fairfield Woods project. I'll ask unanimous consent to move his agenda item to be immediately following public comment. Hearing no objection, we will, Mr. Sapone, I can't see you out there, but I know you're out there, so we'll deal with that issue, 6A, immediately after public comments. So now on to public comments and petitions. The same rules apply as always. Just please come up, state your name and address. 2 minutes is the limit, and these are for non-voting items that you wish to bring to the attention of the Board of Education. Thank you. State your name and address.
Kelly Crisp, 194 Paper Mill Lane. I believe attending a safe school is a right of all children, teachers, and administrators. Although I appreciate that our district has spent thousands of dollars on brick and mortar safety fixes designed to react to potential breaches, we have failed to dedicate resources designed to meaningfully prevent school safety threats, de-escalate harmful behavior, and respond quickly, consistently, and appropriately to safety incidences. I believe the most effective and efficient use of our limited funding should be placed in a system designed to bridge the communication gap between the people who have information about a possible safety threat or harmful behavior and people that can respond timely and appropriately. Online reporting systems currently in use around the country and internationally have prevented school tragedies such as shootings, stabbings, suicide, substance abuse, sexual harassment, and bullying. A comprehensive system, such as one that I have advocated for called TIPS, would effectively reduce our liability, save the district money, tangibly contribute to a positive school climate, and increase our working conditions. On May 14th, I sent all Board of Ed members, as well as Dr. Title, an email strongly encouraging them to earmark $5,000 either through the school climate budget or safety and security budget for a safety threat and incident online reporting system that would provide a free, customizable school climate survey. On April 4th, I presented my findings to the school climate district team, of which I'm a member, and I'm now a certified school climate trainer. I have discussed the online reporting system with Chief McNamara, Mr. Hatzis, Ms. Tiley, and Senator Blumenthal's office. The documents in my email provide a detailed breakdown of the cost. I strongly encourage you to vote to keep our schools safe by dedicating $5,000 to an online reporting system. It would also help us to comply with anonymous reporting, which we are required to do so by law. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Perfectly timed. Please state your name and address.
Elizabeth Courtney, 190 Acorn Lane in Southport. I believe that every person up here is dedicated to our children and to their education. I would ask that as you face difficult choices that you keep in mind the importance of world languages, especially at the younger ages. Many studies have shown that children's brains at a young age are very plastic. This is their best opportunity to learn world languages. I personally pay out of pocket for my 5-year-old and 7-year-old to receive world language instruction. I think it's critical that Fairfield attempt to keep this in mind and advance the learning and the opportunity, because this is a very small window. If it closes, it's very hard to regain if we only have world languages at older ages. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. Please state your name and address.
Suzanne Meska, 123 Rygate Road. I am going to ask the Board of Education to look at your policy 1140 as far as materials to be distributed through the schools. I've gone back and forth on this policy, and I have heard comments from various members of the board on my concern about this. But this year's precedent of sending home a slip on the budget that had information that had not been discussed by this board as a means to, in essence, ignite the parent cause. I just don't know that that's the direction we want to go. To have parents and some Board of Ed members respond to me that, well, they did it, so we need to do it, is really not the direction that I'm looking our board to move into. I've tried to think of a way to rewrite it, and I haven't been able to, because I don't want there to be censorship either. But I just ask, if we're going to release material through any nonprofit, their review process take place so that we make sure that the information contained in that is factual, and if it's budget related, that it's been presented to the Board of Ed. The second issue that I wanted to address is the substitutes, or lack thereof, at the high school. Prior to April vacation, my son spent more time in the cafeteria. I know eventually it's going to be really beautiful, but we're losing on instructional time due to the fact that we don't have money in the budget at FLHS for substitutes. While I appreciate that we've been able to meet our financial requirements and demands for the town, it is being done on the backs of our high school students who have canceled classes. And the final topic that I wanted to address, I figured I had to get here early, so I might as well put it all in, is while I appreciate the need for SBAC and the request that we've made of our juniors to see on Infinite Campus that we are offering parking pass priorities and library passes as an incentive to take them seriously. I don't know if bribing our students is really the direction we want to go to incentivize them.
Mrs. Miska, time is up.
Thank you.
Thank you. Please state your name and address.
Steve Baker, 22 Charles Street. I'd just like to ask that you take Dr. Title's proposed cuts and pass them all as is. I know that there are many things that I wish were not being cut from that list. I understand that you'll probably suggest things that I think that are a good idea, but I know that all the programs and expenses are integrated, and to cut one would probably cause a domino effect and take out and put in other cuts that I would not be happy with or might end up cause more of a problem in the future. And if you pass them like they are, it would make this meeting nice and short. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your comment on process. If there are other people who have comments that they want to make on the process of this budget thing, fine, but if you're going to address comments about the individual budget adjustments, please reserve those for the time that it's on the agenda. But state your name and address, please.
Good evening, Stephen Scheinberg, 15 Flax Road. My wife and I moved here a year and a half ago. My youngest is in college, so I do not have any children in the Fairfield Public Schools. Mr. Chairman, thank you for your service. Members of the Board of Ed, thank you for your service. I know about your commitment to public education. As I stated on previous occasions, we're very fortunate to have a talented, dedicated professional in Dr. Title working for us here. So, number one, the process to me should be that if there's any changes that you're making to what Dr. Title has proposed, that should have been done before tonight and not after public comments. So I think that we need to think about, you need to think on your board about your process. And then my main point is that to review the code of conduct that you've all sworn to, and that is that your responsibility is not to run the schools through administration, but together with fellow board members to see that they are well run through effective policies. I will attempt to confine my board action to policy making, planning, and appraisal, and help to frame policies and plans only after the board has consulted those who will be affected by its actions. So in summary, your role is to make policy. Your role is not to micromanage. That is the job of the superintendent. I'm here tonight like other parents, and unfortunately parents have to leave their children to come repeatedly to this board to speak up for what's right and what they deserve, and that is adequately funded schools and the support that we support Dr. Title. So I'm here to say that this board should vote for the budget as it was amended by Dr. Title per the RTM. Please, it's enough. Because I don't know what this agenda that this board has or some members of this board has, but the agenda of the parents in this town, and every parent that you see has 10 to 20 friends that will be out to support candidates.
Thank you very much. Your time is up.
The education of the town.
Thank you. State your name and address if you have any further comments that people wish to make.
I'm sorry, I have a budget-related comment. Do you mind if I go now down?
Nope.
So I can get distracted?
Please do. Please do. I would ask the board if we gave you 4 minutes, because 2 of you were there, but I'm just joking. 2 minutes, please.
Well, I'm actually speaking for 2 other people as well who couldn't come as well because of work and kid-related challenges. But I'm speaking, I'm Sarah Adya, this is my husband, Nilanjan Adya. Also not able to be present are Kimberly Pacholi and her husband, Teho Song. And we are speaking about one of the budget cuts that dramatically affects a small dues-paying part of the population, that being the preschool busing for high tuition kids. For us deciding what preschool to go to, that was a significant factor, both environmental and convenience related. Both of my husband and I work, both these other 2 people who I'm speaking for work. We are of the large number of people, 21 in total, of full tuition students who do take their kids put their kids on the bus. I know there are some people who think that their busing is not often used. But I would like to make a point, that data-supported point, that many of us do rely on the buses, in the full tuition category. So I think for us it makes it much less ideal of a preschool option. Frankly, there are many preschool options out there. We chose public school because busing was an option, and it made Ella, my daughter Ella, specifically requested to be in a place where she could bus. I mean, she loves the experience. She's there where it doesn't matter what income group you are. It's a very diverse school. It's fantastic. She loves it. But for us, frankly, it becomes much less appealing. That's significant for the bottom line, especially because you're considering a $42,000 cut, to remove one of the buses, right? But each of those students, so 21 students, that's $3,500 times 21 students. That's a total of $73,000 that's going into the budget from the full tuition students. Now, even if half of those students decide to choose a preschool option, now I remind you there are many preschools out there that do not offer some of the perks, busing, that public school does. If you lose even half of those students, you're not going to get any of the benefit of the money that you hope to cut from the budget with these students. So that's my main point, and also just an equality question. I mean, do we want to set the precedent of basing access to buses on income? So that's my point.
Thank you very much. Please state your name and address.
Christine Vitale, 254 Vernon Hill Road. I'm hoping to be here later to comment, but I'll comment on the process. I just hope that as we approach these budget adjustments, we're looking at the amount that has been reduced by the RTM, and we're not looking to rewrite the entire budget. I'm hearing some rumors. I don't want to really mention them right now, but a lot of issues were addressed by this board on reinstating programs back in January, and I'm a little bit nervous about rewriting a budget that we sent through the town bodies already. I would ask that you would really just take Dr. Title's suggestions. We've been through this before. They don't change that. Year after year, we're really in the same spot, it seems like. I feel like they really tried to spread the cuts among a lot of different areas and with least impact to as many students as possible. As terms of pay to play, I'm against it, but if you're going to move forward, my personal preference would be either try to spread it among all students who participate or don't do it at all. I kind of feel like just singling out a certain group really isn't fair. But I thank you for your time and your service, and I appreciate the tough decision you have in front of you tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Please state your name and address.
Hello, I'm Jana Fanar, 57 Riverside Drive, District 10. And I just want to kind of second some previous speakers' opinion and comment stating that I do support Dr. Title's adjustments to the budget because this budget has gone through several different periods of comments and feedback and back and forth. And given that our RTM already voted to cut the budget, something has to be done. We're in this position, and if we wanted to have the suggestions and adjustments, we should have done it earlier, or we should have advocated for them during the time when RTM was voting on that. That's my personal opinion. And I do believe that we should move forward at this point, because parents are tired, families are tired, the town is tired of all this bickering and little battles in between. I think it is a comprehensive budget that Dr. Tyler has proposed, and I do believe that we should support it. Thank you so much for your time. I understand it's a very hard decision, so we appreciate your input. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else coming forward? I don't see anybody rising from their chair. Thank you very much to the public for participating. And with the unanimous consent, we moved item 6A, which is enclosures 1 and 2, up, approval of the Fairfield Woods Middle School project. The recommended motion is that the Board of Education accept the Fairfield Woods Middle School project 051-0122 EA as complete. Do I have a motion? Mr. Convertito, seconded by Mrs. Gerber. Mr. Sapone, there you are. So if you have any comments that you wish to make at this time, and then we'll go to board questions.
No, basically everything I wanted to say I put into a letter to Dr. Title, which I believe you all have copies of. I'm really here in case anybody had any questions about the project in particular, just to answer them before the project's closed.
And as unaccustomed as Mr. Cullen is to liking to speak, does Mr. Cullen have any comments that he wishes to make? No? Questions from the board?
Very good.
No questions from the board.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, with no further debate, are we ready to act on the motion? Oh, that's it too. We do have public comment on a voting item. Public comment on the acceptance of Fairfield Woods Middle School project. Public comment on Fairfield Woods Middle School project that we're sitting in and have been using the last couple of years as they finish the punch list and do other things. Nobody from the public coming forward. Back to the board. Are we ready to act? Okay, all in favor that the Board of Education accept the Fairfield Woods Middle School project? Won't read the number again as complete. Raise your hand. It is unanimous for those present, which is 8 members, absent Mrs. Kennelly. Thank you very much, Mr. Sapone, for your service to this district and this town. Mrs. Maxon Kennelly is not here, but she recruited, he left his seat. She recruited an able assistant from the policy committee to present the wellness policy, and I think he was not expecting us to get to it this quickly. Mr. Convertito.
Need a motion.
No, yeah, I should put the motion on the table first. The recommended motion for the acceptance of policy 5515 is that the Board of Education approve policy 5515, students, protocol for administration of emergency medications by non-nursing school personnel. Do I have a motion? Mrs. Gerber, seconded by Mr. Convertito. Mrs. Gerber, you want to defer to Mr. Convertito for his comments? Okay.
Policy 5519, I believe, was originally presented in the April meeting with the markups on it. This edition doesn't show the markups. This was to bring 5519 into compliance with the new state statutes. Were you 5515 or 19, right?
15.
15, I'm sorry. It's the non-medical. This is the, I'm sorry, was presented at the last meeting. This is the protocol for the administration of emergency medications by non-nursing nursing school personnel. What we did was add in the dosages. Again, this policy will be coming back to the board probably sometime over the summer, as there is a new state statute coming through on the Good Samaritan issues with people administering EpiPens, which will be incorporated into the statute. The health department asked us to move it forward so that the dosages were correct within our policy manual, so that's what we're moving forward tonight.
Questions for staff or Mr. Convertito? Mrs. Gerber.
Through the chair to Mr. Convertito. One question, you said over the summer it would come back to policy, probably. So then would you have it for a while and then it would come back to the board, or will it come, since you've already seen it, would it come to us quickly?
We don't have the final drafts yet from the legislature. We assume that policy will take a look at this either early July or we don't meet in August, so we won't get to it till September. The board will probably see it in the fall, but
Okay.
policy will take it up before that. to incorporate the Good Samaritan restriction or allowances into the policy.
And that's the only thing that's changing in the statute is just the Good Samaritan?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
For the public's benefit, the changes that are being made now to the emergency medications have a time issue with them that we'd like to get them in place as soon as possible, which means that this policy will have to come back to us once the state takes action as well. So we're not quite complete with it, but we do want to update it from certain perspectives because of the timeliness of it. Other questions from the board members? Hearing none. Out to the public, this is a voting item. Any member of the public wish to speak on approval of policy number 5515? 5515.
Hi, Tricia Donovan, 164 Teener Drive. I would just like to express my support for this as a parent of food allergy children and someone who's been in the food allergy world for a long time. We find that more and more children and adults are being faced with late onset allergies, so this would serve to protect those people who have not been diagnosed. They would be able to be treated in the schools, having a first reaction. And as we know, with any kind of extreme reaction to allergies, time is of the essence. So if we can treat these children as quickly as possible, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other comments from the public on policy 5515? Seeing nobody coming forward, back to the board. Any further questions or comments before we take action? Hearing none, seeing nobody raising their hand. So we'll say approval that the motion before you is that the Board of Education approve policy 5515, Students Protocol for Administration of Emergency Medications by Non-Nursing School Personnel. All in favor, raise your hand. It is unanimous with 8 members in attendance. Mrs. Kennelly not here at the moment. Okay. On to item 5B. Approval of the superintendent's recommended budget adjustments for 2014-15. The recommended motion is that the Board of Education approve the superintendent's recommended budget adjustments for 2014-15. Do I have a motion? Mr. Patton, Mrs. Gerber, comments, questions from the board? Mr. Fatterbean.
I guess a point
Followed
of
by
order.
Mrs. Lou McCormick.
I guess a point of order, whether it's the chair's intent to discuss individual items or vote on individual items or separate some out, or what protocol.
I mean, we have in the past voted the package of cuts, and so we can accept amendments to that package and vote on the package, is what I think would be an efficient way of doing it, but...
There are just 3 that give me concern. And I guess maybe I'd like to discuss briefly and then maybe decide whether to move to separate those out.
The motion is on the floor, so discussion is in order.
So before I present a motion, I'll just give my rationale why I might propose a motion. And I guess the 3 that concern me primarily are the Board of Education workshop conferences. Originally, we had put back $2,400 in the budget so that at least some members can attend, with the provision that if members decide to pay on their own, they certainly can, but that some members may not feel that way, but still would benefit from getting training at that seminar. And the $2,400 was, I believe, selected so that at least the new board members could attend possibly, because I do think it's beneficial for new board members to attend that conference. So I understand the difficulties with the budget. I would possibly propose that just be reduced to maybe $1,200, and the other $1,200 be taken out of professional development, because that's sort of a shared responsibility. I think it's important for the board to get that, in essence, professional development as well. But I don't have strong feelings in that particular one, but there's a possibility that I would move to just only reduce that by $1,200 rather than the full $2,400. The largest one I have a problem with is the athletic rental charges. As the last time we discussed adding a fee for athletes to take advantage of the extracurricular activities in our schools. I didn't support it then. I don't support it now. I don't think it's appropriate to charge fees in a public education system for the athletes. I understand the difficulties. It was added back in once. Now it's suggested to be taken out again. So that one I have a stronger feeling for. The next one that I have concern about is the eliminate one pre-K bus. And I thought about this quite a bit. The problem I have with this one is the fact that you're targeting certain tuition-paying students. I understand there's no obligation currently for us to provide pre-K education, but it is a public education system, and it seems like that pre-K is becoming more a de facto elementary education, elementary school education, which we are obligated to pay for and provide for free. I know we approved this plan for a tuition-based system. I personally would not like it to be a tuition-based system and feel that it should be, since it's in a public system, should be provided for free. So I have a problem with the distinctions being made for tuition-paying students and non-tuition-paying students, and really believe it might be a situation where the primary purpose of this was to prevent racial isolation in one school, McKinley, and that maybe there's better ways to achieve this at a less of a cost, or maybe we have to rethink what the real purpose the district has in providing pre-K and the beneficial aspects in general for providing pre-K, separate and apart from the racial isolation aspects, and maybe come together with a full plan as to what is fair for everyone. So I mean now this is the complexity of this issue, and I'm not sure how to address it, but I really, as I thought about this, have a problem with targeting students that pay tuition and don't pay tuition, providing services in a public system. It's a public system. We should provide services to all the public, irrespective of whether they pay tuition or not pay tuition, or not provide the service. So I realize it's not a situation where I think not providing any busing and get rid of the service completely is necessarily appropriate, because it will affect the system, in my opinion, too drastically. But to get in a situation where you're carving out a tuition-paying student and not providing that service to that tuition-paying student, but providing to other students who pay maybe partial or full tuition, or partial tuition or no tuition, I think it's a dangerous precedent to set for a public system, and one of which I don't feel right about. So of those, as I said, that one I will probably not support, and the athletic and rental charges I would not support. The Board of Ed workshops is a want, and I could live with not having any funding for that and let the board members pay on their own. I would not request the money, but some board members may, and I thought providing at least maybe 2 board members the option to go would be beneficial. But as I said, those are my thoughts on it, and before the resolution of the discussion and debate, if I ask the chair's indulgence to let me make those 2 motions before they vote on the main motion, which is the full list.
Yeah, I think it probably makes sense for us to have some discussion to see where board members are, and then go through a series of motions, and I understand that you would like to divide the question, if you will, of those 2 items as a separate vote, my guess is what you're thinking, but as discussion goes on, you may have different thoughts. For each of the comments that people make, we normally go to our superintendent and ask for either some comments or advice or guidance on the different ideas. So, Dr. Title, do you have any comments that you wish to make?
Yeah, I would like to give a little background on the pre-K, a bit, because Mr. Fadabine mentioned that it is part of the plan that the school district sent to the state a couple times before it was finally approved, and we are on the record as, for our racial imbalance plan there, and I think that, we do have to be careful with this one. But one of the reasons that we proposed this plan as a way to deal with racial imbalance was, in addition to being relatively low impact and low cost compared to some other options, which I won't name, that begin with R. In addition to that, that yes, that was certainly one part of the plan. But one of the reasons we were interested in it is because we also believe that preschool is probably the best investment we can make if we're going to be serious about closing the achievement gap. And I think I showed you some data on that when we did the budget. And when we went through the difference in student performance. That is true in Fairfield and is true across the state, and that is that there's a relationship there between how some students do and other students do, and that the free and reduced population is not performing as well as the rest of the population, and that this is actually a strategy that in terms of return on investment in the literature shows a very high rate of return. And so the concept here was, yes, it will help in, racial imbalance, that's one tenet to it, but it is a larger district strategy of giving kids getting into kindergarten the skills they need to be successful, because a lot of the achievement gap actually has occurred before kids even get into kindergarten. There's all kinds of studies about vocabulary and so forth. And so we wanted to ensure that students of limited means had access. So that was sort of the origination. So there's a multifaceted reason why that program exists. And in fact, that was one of the reasons why it was lauded by the state when we brought it to them. Obviously, if it doesn't solve the racial imbalance problem, then we'll have to come back as a board and come up with something else or tweak the system or something. But there's sort of two prongs to it. And we do have, for better or worse, there are examples where, the federal government charges some kids for meals and some don't, based on income. We don't provide a free meal to everybody, we provide a free meal to kids that can't afford it. In our pay-to-play situation, kids who can't afford it, don't pay. So some kids do pay and some kids don't pay. Unfortunately, philosophically, that may not be a good thing, but there are examples where in the system some people do have to pay and others don't based on their ability to pay. But I really wanted to just comment on the whole picture on the pre-K, because you had mentioned that there was more to it than just the racial imbalance piece. There was also the part of a strategy to help get kids ready for kindergarten who might not otherwise be able to access preschool. So that was just my comment on that one. I think, athletic charge is one.
Sorry.
We all right now?
Thank you, Jerry.
Jerry, whoever that was, thank you. I'll just say this out loud and see where it goes. I've obviously been, uncomfortable with the rental charges, and I know the board's been uncomfortable with it for some time. It is a way for us to not have to cut programs or reduce programs. It allows us to keep offering programs. And I am certainly willing to put a budget together for 15-16 that removes these. If that's the wishes of the board, we sit down in September or October, and the board says, you know what, we're sick and tired of these fees, you're putting the budget together now, there's 9 of us here, and at least 7 of us are saying, look, we know we're going to get some grief on this, but we just don't want it, take it out, don't put your budget together. And if I get that direction, then I'm perfectly happy to obliterate these for the following year. But right now, we're in a tough spot, and there's probably fair or unfair ways to do it, but not something I'm, committed to philosophically, it's just a practical thing, and I'll just say that that may go for anything, but obviously, I don't want to put something in a budget that the vast majority of the board obviously doesn't want. It just means then the board needs to be with me when we bring it to the town bodies, and they say, how come you got rid of that revenue source? What are you thinking? That you're all still standing behind me nodding on it. So that's my feeling, that philosophically I kind of agree, but practically it allows us to keep programs. So those are my thoughts on that one.
For the benefit of the new board members, our budget process means that at either a September or an October board meeting, we put an agenda item on the table that says, what suggestions do individual members of the Board of Ed have for the development of the budget? And then based on conversation, if it appears as though a majority are saying, yes, let's develop a budget that says, as Dr. Title mentioned, that is without athletic fees, then he's a good listener. He'll develop a budget without athletic fees. And so that's what he's referring to, is that September, October meeting where we have a discussion to give guidance for the development of the budget that the staff work on. Other comments? And let's have some discussion, and then we'll move to motion once we kind of have a feeling of where people are. Mr. No, I think I said Mrs. Lou McCormick and then Mr. Conditito? Yeah.
I guess I echo some of the thoughts that Mr. Fattabine expressed, and when I think the discussions around the pre-K busing had first come up, it seemed like a reasonable concept to say, okay, and if we can at least eliminate busing, that might save programs elsewhere for those who can afford, and continue for those maybe who can't afford. But then upon further discussion with the public and various, many other individuals, and hearing the different feedback, I hear the concern about, is it really fair to offer it to some and not to others, versus having the whole thing either there or not offered altogether. And just to put perspective on why I do focus on this is because
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
It's because I feel that this is it's a transportation cost, and while I understand transportation is somewhat linked to programs, it's not as explicitly tied to the instruction of the students. And to me, that is a step away from affecting student achievement for a vast majority of students. And so when I consider the cost, so then it comes back to kind of a cost versus benefit analysis. And in thinking about the cost of the pre-K busing, which is in total about $250,000, and we think about the programs that have been cut, which, we could probably buy back for less than $200,000. And I have to ask myself, is it worth it to affect thousands and thousands of students that were benefiting from these actual programs? For example, the pay-to-play, the middle school gifted, the fifth grade music class, the gifted assessments, the grammar assessments that I had priced out before for K through 8. I know there's been an outcry about grammar. Is it provided? Has it been properly assessed? Are kids really learning it? I think a grammar assessment would be a first step in understanding where we are in that process. The school climate that Ms. Crisp had raised, $5,000. The BOE training that Mr. Fattabine had raised. All of these packaged together add up to $170,000. And when I compare that to pre-K busing, which is not required by the state, and which we are going over and above the call of duty in probably in a right way to incent people to want to attend the pre-K program. However, I would say that we're already offering it to those in need for free or for reduced cost. So that is already a perk. And then I understand that really one of the, and the primary motivator was the racial imbalance for McKinley. I have to ask myself, well then, is it a good trade-off, the $250 versus the $170 of programs? And given the 60 students that actually avail themselves of the buses, a third of which are tuition pay, and then say to myself, okay, well, at the end of the day, is it possible that we can not affect the racial imbalance benefit that we're getting from this by perhaps, instead of eliminating it in its entirety, let's not discriminate by who, but let's carve out McKinley and say, let's offer a couple of buses for McKinley to be able to offer busing to Burr and Dwight, and we'll just remove the other 4. And by doing so, that gets us almost all the way to being able to reinstate all these programs that we cut. And to me, when I look at that, that to me is a good risk-return trade-off, because this affects a small amount of students being driven by this racial imbalance issue, and it won't affect the racial imbalance issue at the end of the day, because we're affecting everybody except the McKinley School, and we're able to return programs to the 2,000, or funding at least, to the 2,000 athletes, to the 5th grade across the district, to the middle school, so 6th, 7th, and 8th grade gifted programs, to the climate survey, which we talked about the importance of being able to provide a quality information process, the training, which I think, I think we want our board members to be well trained. I think we really don't do the town justice if the board members that join, particularly those who are new, come on and aren't familiar with the processes, and they aren't trained as well as they could be. And some of us do pay for it, but others don't. I'm sorry, I just wanted to wait for them to finish.
Yep.
So I'm just, so this is my thought around this, that I think that the pre-K busing, as well as the pay-to-play and all these other programs, deserve further consideration, and I would like to be able to propose an amendment and see if the board is willing to consider it, because I think this is a good risk-return trade-off.
Okay, so I have 1 and then 2, but let's have discussion, see where we're ending up with thoughts, and then we'll go through the amendment process if that's what the discussion leads to. Mr. Convertito? No further comment. Any other comments that people have? Mr. Llewellyn?
Along the lines of what Mr. Fadbean said, in terms of charging tuition or not charging tuition, if in fact the buses are not provided, then should we even be charging the tuition? And if we don't, when we lose, I believe it's about $133,000 or $135,000 of revenue, where can we find that in the budget so that we're offsetting the impact on those folks who actually take the buses? And I know in past years the board had talked about a stipend for the middle school liaison. That is basically $133,000. So that would offset the tuition if in fact we wanted to go that route. But I just thought I'd throw that out there to keep things balanced.
Well, I just want to caution you that playing around too much with the racial imbalance that we have right now, if you think you've upset people by eliminating the preschool bus for the full tuition students, all these people that have signed up for pre-K next year that are relying on the transportation are going to be very upset, number one. And number two, I think we're jeopardizing our situation with the state on the racial imbalance plan. I think this one move we can probably clear, but I think we're flirting with a danger. We may not be able to fill the program. I mean, there's just so many nuances to this and so many ramifications that I think it's a very difficult thing to do at the last minute. Just like you don't want to redo your budget, just like you don't want to make big program or curricular changes on the eve of these things. I mean, this is opening up a humongous can of worms. And I will also say, and the middle school principals will talk about it, that I will not support reducing stipends for the team leaders at the middle school. Those are important positions. And while there was some discussion last year, it was also rejected last year because they're integral to the operation and the student learning at the middle school. But ultimately, you know, anybody who wants to eliminate something here has to come up with a corresponding cut. Otherwise, we're not in balance. So I'll when there's an official motion on where the other cuts should come, I'll weigh in on that one. But I'm reluctant on the pre-K, the one, I think to go to just offering it to McKinley kids, I mean, that's more discriminatory than what we have on here. So I don't know. I just think that's a big can of worms, the whole thing. When we get our report back from the state on where we stand, if we have to look at our racial imbalance plan again, well, that might be the time to do it, but this is a big thing, this racial imbalance plan. Just want to let people know that.
Mr.
Big legal thing.
Mr. Patton hasn't spoken yet, so Mr. Patton first, then Mr. Fattabine.
Not to stick to the same topic, but on the pre-K program. Actually, through the chair to Dr. Title or anybody else in the administration who can possibly answer. From a number standpoint, if we lose, actually let me back up for a second. Are we at is the pre-K program at capacity?
The pre-K program is, for next year, is not yet at capacity for free and reduced students. It is at full capacity for full tuition students, and there's a waiting list for that. Because typically, the free and reduced students tend to come later in the program, and the design of the program is to have a balanced classroom with about 1/3 in each category. So it's possible that more full tuition students will come in if we don't fill up the other slots. But right now, we know that there are people that will be interested in those slots, but they just tend to come a little later to the party, so to speak. So right now, we have a lot of interest in the full. You know, we don't know that, obviously, if we were to eliminate the bus for the full, how many of those families would bail out and not go. But right now, there's a lot of interest in the program from the full tuition. But again, the design of this was not simply to provide preschool to full tuition, it was to provide access to pre-K for kids who otherwise might not have access to pre-K to help with our achievement gap.
Okay, so I guess to that point, is the program traditionally, once the fall is going, is the program usually at capacity?
It's been pretty close.
Okay.
It's been pretty close. We've got 18 cap in the morning and in the afternoon for both schools. They're running between 16 and 18. The other thing is we have people who sign up for it, and they don't send their kids every single day. They might send their kids 3 days a week, and so the class size on any given day may be 12 to 14, but they have a slot, and so we have some kids that we transport Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Some people come 5 days a week. That's a parent choice. So we've been pretty close on it, but it often takes until the middle of the summer to fill it up, because there's some people, that just don't even think about pre-K till like August 1st, and they have nowhere else to go, and we become a place for them. So that's sort of how it plays out. Again, this is the first year of having the two programs. Or second year. It's been relatively new, so we're still learning as we go along on this. But it has met its target. In the last year, we got under the racial imbalance number. It only takes a few kids to go to make it work, but it's also broadened out the preschool opportunities for other kids in the district, which is another benefit.
I guess where I'm going with this is, if we do, as was pointed out by a member of the public, if we do potentially lose some full-time or full tuition students due to to not having a bus provided, will those numbers fill in? Are we going to cannibalize our dollars, saving $42,000 on the bus? And then are we going to lose $40,000 in tuition? And then it's a wash, and then it was, we'll revisit that again next year, I suppose. Yeah. But, just speaking as a parent, remembering back to those preschool days in this town, paid preschools fill up fairly quickly, and you have tutor time, the former child, I guess it's Child World Academy now, the former tutor time, that's going to take over Stratfield Market, but won't be open next fall. They have an entire school that those kids had to get scattered all over the place. So there is huge demand still in this town for pre-K, for paid pre-K. I just don't want to, cannibalize our dollars for, one versus the other. I think, at least for now, I think it's a fair, cut. I certainly don't like it either. Certainly, of course, parents have signed up for that program if they're paying, you know, either it's convenient for them or the bus is a needed necessity for them, and you know, they'll have to find other options, and I'm sorry for that if this cut goes through. As to the CABE cut, I kind of agree that I don't agree with Mr. Fattabine on cutting it to 1,200. I think it was 36, and then it was cut to 24. I'd like to try and keep it at the 2,400 that level. That's not a lot of money. I think definitely board members, you know, should be going to that event, as many as possible, whether they can, you know, if they need assistance or not. And I think that's a tiny little amount that we could, you know, find, you know, elsewhere. I had some issues with the climate survey in terms of the data that we're not going to get versus what we got before. And I guess only time will tell if that goes through. I'm not in favor of that change, but I looked around and I really, other than hacking at some big items that would probably have a worse effect, I couldn't find $20,000 in a safer place to take that away.
Thank you. Mr. Fattabine.
I guess maybe it's time to make a motion.
Okay, so let me back up for a moment, because that might catch some board members
All
by
right.
surprise.
So I was going to ask whether that...
So let me say that at the moment, I understand that you would want a motion to divide the question.
Well,
You're not making a motion to amend the list of changes. I want to clarify from...
I was going to do one at a time.
You want to do both?
Well, I want to do one motion at a time, and then there's another, if that, there may be another motion. I don't want to divide all the issues here. I would suggest, I would make one motion to change one item on the proposed recommendations, and then decide later, depending on discussion, whether to make another motion to suggest another item. In other words, I wouldn't divide. I would just make a motion to amend the recommendation in one line item for now.
That's what I'm trying to clarify. You're not wanting to divide the question so that you can vote separately on those issues. You actually want to make an amendment to change a line item and say, let's not do this, and then take it from someplace else. You're going the latter route?
It depends. I know you have to balance it, and I may balance it somewhat, but the second, I've given my thought process. One of them I can maybe balance. One I may not be able to balance right now, and was going to suggest that the superintendent come back with additional recommendations, should that pass, with how to balance it.
Well, we have to take action tonight on the list, so I think the superintendent at the moment is saying, I've given you my recommendation, and so we'll go from there. But
That's why I wanted to go one at a time.
Let me just clarify where I think we are, that you have 2 or 3 motions that you'd like to advance, one of which is clear in your mind, you've got it balanced, the other one you think you may have balanced, the third one you may not.
No. One I have what I believe may be a substantial balance, but still a little short. The other one, I don't have any good suggestion for balancing. And I look for the guidance of the superintendent to provide, should that be the wish of the board, to recommend additional changes to provide that.
Okay, and while you didn't talk about the subject other than pre-K, Ms. Lou McCormick, you have some recommended amendments to the list, right?
Correct.
Right. Before we go past discussion into recommended adjustments, are there other board members that want to either have a comment during discussion or are planning on making some changes? Mr. Llewellyn, followed by Mr. Patton, followed by Mr. Convertito.
Sure. I guess I had a couple comments, additional comments. I guess one of the things that was mentioned earlier as it relates to school climate is, if the 20 is going to come out for the existing, that 5 be put back in for the TIPS program, which is a threat assessment incident management, which my understanding addresses 2 issues. One is school safety, and the other is that $5,000 program will also allow for a school climate survey to be done through it. And I guess the other question is, if we do not take that one bus away. Through the chair to Dr. Title, is it possible to find $42,000 somewhere else, such as an adjustment for the differential that we had discussed on like the staff replacement, the 35 to the 40 numbers? If we could find that somewhere, you know, that might make things slightly easier as it relates to that, because an all or none, I think, makes more sense than going after just one.
Can I add the other half of the equation to your question and ask Dr. Title to respond not only to, are there places where potentially we could get savings, but since the budget was put together, are there places that Mrs. Munsell is nervous about? So I think it would be good to comment on both sides of the ledger.
Right, right, all right. So there's a couple things. One is, you know, the issue of the $5,000 has just come up recently. There's a school climate team it was not around, it was not discussed when the budget was put together. I think that's something that if the school climate team wants to go in that direction, we'd have to work on, you know, how that could play out. I don't know enough about that right now. That's a relatively recent development, and I'm not sure you want to entertain adding things into the budget at this moment, given that you're trying to find money for a cut. Not making a comment on the worth of that, but you know, it's like the budget's been done, has been going through, and now all of a sudden we're going to add something, you know, to it. I think that's problematic. The one thing, I mean, I really hope you don't spend a lot of time talking about the Board of Ed workshops and conferences. Okay, I mean, my take on this is it's $2,400. It's largely a symbolic thing. We can handle this. If somebody can't go because they can't pay it, we can just take it out of a professional development account and we'll do it, and people can be reasonable, and you know, that's the kind of small change that really was symbolic in there. So, you know, I think we can accommodate that without having to have, you know, an hour of discussion on it. I'm just trying to save us a little time. I think that there are, you know, always, you know, possibilities that certain accounts will end up better than we projected, you know, based on newer information. And so it's always possible that, you know, we might end up to the good on something like staff replacement, depending on where people are hired on the salary schedule and whatnot, and how many people retire and don't. But at the same time, I had a couple things going on. One is, for the first time ever, we've put $110,000 in here for non-certified turnover. We've never had that in there before. The pattern in the past has been it's run in that vicinity, but who knows? We may need to make that up. That was a little bit of a wiggle room that doesn't exist anymore. Based on our track record this year, I can tell you right now, based on the fact that we have negotiations, and who knows, potentially protracted negotiations with teachers and administrators, with all the legal bills we have right now, I'd be very nervous about our legal account. I'm nervous about our special ed consultation account. I'm worried about our special ed evaluation account. I'm always worried about custodial overtime and emergencies and boilers and this sort of thing that could happen. So, you know, we don't, at the end of the day, when we do this, try to balance out all these accounts where, okay, we might have some money in the staff reserve, we might not, but we really could use it over here. It's just that it's possible that we might have some there, but you know, I'm just trying to balance this off and be reasonable. And I thought taking the extra 3 retirees, we could absorb that. Getting more than that, I think we're going to end up using it for one of those other accounts. So I'm a little nervous about that, because for every account that looks like it might be to the good, you're just as easy to overrun it. And I don't want to have to get to a situation like we did this year where, you know, you get a big surprise and then we have to freeze and then we get behind the 8 ball. So I think so that's my, you know, general feeling on that one. I think I said at the last meeting that if somebody wanted to restore something in there and wanted to know from me where to take it from, that I would just chop it into technology capital. I'm not advocating that. I think that we are behind the 8 ball on technology and on maintenance. We're doubly behind the 8 ball on technology and maintenance because this year, because of the freeze, those were some of the departments that had to forego purchases. So, you know, it's something that we tried to improve this year. But if you say, look, where would you take it from? I would say, tech capital, and we'll let the technology department figure out exactly what won't be replaced for next year. But I'm not advocating for that, but again, I made that statement before. But I just want to say that obviously I'm concerned that we maintain our facilities, and that because we're behind the 8 ball this year, I think those accounts are going to be under even more pressure for next year. Of course, my ultimate recommendation is the list in front of you, but if pushed, that's where I would suggest. I think I hit all the points.
Okay, Mr. Fattabine,
more than once.
I think you have the answer that you were looking for, is that if you do want a counterbalancing, his recommendation would be capital technology. In terms of the earlier question that you were seeking his recommendation. Mr. Convertito. I think you had raised your hand, right?
Yeah, the only thing I'm going to put forth, and it has nothing to do with numbers, as far as gross numbers for the budget, it's more of a descriptor, which would be on the high school athletics rental charges, would be that would simply be an athletic charge at $75 per student per sport. So it would not segregate out. I want to get stuff out on the table so we can start discussing it here. So it would not segregate out the rental sports like hockey and swimming and bowling and so forth. So it would be $75 per sport per student athlete. And those were the numbers that were calculated, I believe, through central office to make up that number. And I just think it's more evenly spread across all of the students than those that have rental charges. We have maintenance costs for football fields and softball fields and basketball courts that are built into the budget. So I think to make the distinction between rental, facilities and our own facilities is, as I said before, a distinction without a difference. So I don't know if we're ready for amendments yet or where we're going here.
I think we just about are. I want to just make sure, Mr. Patton, you do not have anything that you're going to propose for a specific change. That's a yes or no question.
That is a no, but I wanted to offer a...
One moment, please. Mr. Llewellyn? Other than...
out there.
Correct? Mrs. Maxon Connelly?
You won't like this answer, but I think I want to wait to hear what people are saying.
Okay, so at the moment we have 3, Mr. Fattabine being 1, Mr. Convertito being, Mrs. Lou McCormick being 2nd, Mr. Fattabine being 3rd. Mrs. Gerber, do you have any changes proposed? Ms. Carnell?
I do.
You would be 4th. Can you give us, I think we have heard from people as to where they're heading. Could you tell us where you'd be heading?
One of the things that I'm trying to understand is we look at Dr. Title's recommendations, and I'm sure this was an extremely difficult list to put together. And, what I've noticed is you can't please everybody, and somebody has to give something. And we look at this, and I believe there's math books that they want to defer to the 15-16 budget under Dr. Title's recommendation. And I guess when I look at something like that, and I don't know if these are new books or our books are just worn out, but the question I look at is, why can't we do something with the amount of projection systems that we want to purchase? Those seem to be quite a large cost, and if we eliminate either all or half of them, it may give us some wiggle room on other things. And maybe somebody can just answer about the math books.
Yeah, I think the math books is an easy one because those are specifically the Algebra 2 textbooks. We had a presentation this year about the math curriculum. In that presentation, they recommended to stay with the existing Algebra 2 textbook for at least one more year, and then consider, if something new comes out from publishers, a new book for 15-16. So this is a win-win item, because there's no need for this money in the 14-15 budget. The money can be put in the 15-16 budget, so that on July 1st, 2015, new books can be purchased and used for the 15-16. So there's no need to find an offset for that. It doesn't preclude them from buying a book. As a matter of fact, it gives them a little more time, because if it stayed in the 14-15 budget, that money would sort of evaporate, and they might be pushed into a book that they really don't want. So it's actually better to have it pushed off to 15-16. So it's not going to hurt the textbook situation at all. And you know, we have the technology plan is a whole big thing that the board has approved, and has approved of technology in all the grades. And again, I'm only mentioning technology capital as, put a gun to my head, where would you take it? I still can't tell you exactly what would not happen as a result of whatever number you pick. So I don't want you to do that. I want you to keep that. But obviously, the board really has their heart set on adjusting this, then I guess that's where you'd go with it.
I'll only make one comment, and then we'll go into, did that answer your questions?
The math did.
The math.
I wanted to get into a little more
Yeah,
detail.
okay, but you may still want to pursue the, where's the note I have for you? For the projection systems, you may want to pursue that. So you're fourth in line in terms of making amendments. Let me just make my own personal comment. For those who have attended these board meetings in the past, you know that the pay to participate is something that I just do not like. I am going to take and hold Dr. Title accountable for his commitment to develop a budget next year that does not have these in it. But I'm going to support the recommended adjustments as they are, simply because it's not an easy task, and if we start let's trade this for that, it's going to be an almost impossible choice. So that's where my position is. Last question, then we'll go to Mr. Fattabine. At the moment, it seems that we only have two duplicates on the conversation on the lines, and that's the relative to pay to play. I take it from Mr. Fattabine that you would like to find an offsetting cost and eliminate it completely. And Mr. Convertito's idea is to say it's revenue neutral, I just want to change the methodology of collecting the revenue. Do I understand that? Because I want to figure out which one we should do first.
Well, I guess if you do my motion first, it may make Mr. Convertito's moot, or not relevant, because I think in order of sense...
Yep. No, agreed. So, Mr. Fattabine, you have the floor to make whatever motions regarding amendments that you wish to make.
Well, I would move to add back into the the superintendent's recommended adjustments, high school athletics rental charges of $56,000, with the suggestion to use savings from the capital account and the fitness weight room carpet replacement of approximately $20,000, and the motorized small gym backboards.
All right, slow down so that our secretary can keep track.
And the motorized small gym backboards for approximately $18,000. There's a slight shortfall of approximately, I don't know, $6,000 or so, maybe a little more.
Well, we need to be specific, because Ms. Munsell is out there keeping account of this. So eliminate the $56,000 as a revenue source, and then eliminate the
20-some thousand for the fitness weight room carpet replacement, and the motorized small gym backboards.
And how much is
about $18,500. So admittedly, there is a shortfall which may have to be.
And you take the balance out of capital tech.
Or maybe I have another motion which may have my suggestion with a surplus, so it may be balanced out
Well, let's
at the next
take
motion.
one motion at a time, so.
So it could, as far as I'm concerned, at the discretion of the superintendent.
Well, we need to, if it's not that, we need to have a very
Or
specific.
some recommend, well,
It's the capital tech. That's his recommendation. If you want to take something, take it
say from the
from
capital,
capital tech.
$3,000 or $4,000 from the capital tech. If you want.
So the 56,020 plus 18.5 is 38.5. The balance comes from capital tech. Is that your motion?
That is my motion then.
Somebody want to do
as
the
a-
math?
as
Back into
a-
the math?
Procedure, I don't know whether it's essential that we come up with a complete solution tonight, or whether we can have a tiered solution where we get most of it done tonight. And
Dr. Title?
No, we need this done tonight. Stay here till 3 in the morning. We got to finish it.
Okay.
Okay.
So the math, who's doing the math that says 56,000, if 20,000 comes from fitness and 18.5 from the other category that Mr. Fattabine mentioned, what's the difference that goes into capital technology? I'm looking down to one of the staff members down there, assuming somebody is doing math.
1,866?
Say again?
1,866? You have 20,340?
No, for $56,000, if we take 20,000 out and 18,500 out, the balance has to go to capital technology. The balance absent the 56 minus the 20K and the 18.5.
Mr. Dwyer? I'm using the exact numbers here. It's 1,819.
No, it's in the budget book.
I've got the numbers. That's what I'm trying to give you. The numbers for the fitness rug was 20,314. The numbers for the motorized backboards was 18,495.
And if you take those two numbers away from 56,000,
It's 18,000, not 1,800.
17,191.
please give me the number.
Exact numbers I have.
Could you give me the number?
17,191.
17,191. So, Mr. Fattabine, is that your official motion to
That
remove
would-
the 56,000 and balance it off by those three numbers, 20,314, 18,495, and 17,191?
That would be my motion.
Okay, and Mrs. Munsell, you have those numbers in the account lines? Do you, or?
Do I have what?
Are we clear on the account lines that are being
Yes.
suggested changes? Do we
Yes.
have a second for that motion?
Can you repeat those three items, please?
Well, let me first see if there's a second for that motion.
I can't vote on it unless
No, no,
I'm...
but if I can't get a second, it's not a motion, it won't even be.
Well, you got to clarify the
voting
motion
item.
before they can get it.
Mrs. Lou McCormick, are
I'll second.
you're seconding it for the purpose of discussion? So, Mr. Fattabine, if you could give.
I would give my
clarity to-
rationale, look, you know, in essence, the fitness weight room carpet, while needing replacement, if it waits, it shouldn't be a safety issue or a serious problem. The small motorized gym backboards, I understand the convenience of having motorized, but they are manually winched up now, and they have been for some time probably, so adding that is not necessarily going to change much. The problem I have with adding a charge for the sports this year, and then having a commitment not to charge next year, doesn't make sense to me, because you have some athletes that may come and go, or seniors that are going to be stuck with paying a fee in 1 year, when the next year, the other students won't have to pay a fee. Either you commit to having a fee or not commit to having a fee. It doesn't make sense to have it instituted in 1 year and then taken away the next year.
That's what we're doing. It's in there now, and you're proposing to take it away.
And that's why I'm proposing to reinstate it, to have the money there so that you don't take it away.
No, we're charging it this year, right now. We are charging it. This is not a new fee,
I know.
right? We're charging it now. I
But
just
it
want to
only
be
has
clear.
been- how many years have we
This
charged
year.
it?
This
We
is
only-
the first year.
This is the first year.
Right, so I just don't want to be clear.
And all right,
the
you know,
facts.
well, I amend it, 2 years. It's unfair to have it for 2 years.
Okay.
And then the same principle of logic applies in the sense that you're instituting a fee for 2 years then. I disagree with it last year as well. Instituting a fee for 2 years and then having a commitment to get rid of that fee this year. For the athletes to go through on those during that 2-year cycle where they had to pay, it's not necessarily fair. So there seems to be a consensus and a commitment that we're not going to have a fee for sports. So if that's the essence of the commitment, then it doesn't make sense to include it or not include the funds to avoid the fee for this year. If you eliminate those two items, I don't think it's going to be that detrimental. And then when you can possibly build the budget next year to re-include those two items that have been offset to not have the sports fee this year. And then you have the inequity of having 2 years of athletes having to pay a fee with other years when they come in they don't. It just seems to me not necessarily the appropriate thing to do in order to get the funds out of only one class or two classes for a period of time. It just seems inequitable to me, and one especially inequitable since the decision in essence is that the policy or the impetus of the board would be not to charge a fee in the long run. So I think the trade-off for not having those capital expenses in this fiscal year or this next fiscal year is not necessarily as detrimental as providing consistency among the charging of fees to athletes. I guess that's my primary, as well as my belief that you shouldn't charge fees for what is in essence an integral part of the educational program and the extracurricular activity of sports. I just don't think should be charged.
Yeah. Ms. Carnell, to answer your question, are you clear that in order to eliminate the $56,000 of revenue that comes from charging athletes who use facilities that we have to lease, Mr. Fattabine would suggest that we not replace the fitness rug for $20,314, not buy the electronic backboards for $18,495, and to take the $17,195 balance out of capital technology, which is a number, but we don't know exactly what we would lose. That would be just something in the past. Are you clear? Okay, Dr. Teitel, well, first to the second, and then I'll ask Dr. Teitel to make a comment. Do you have any comments, or did you just second it for the purpose of discussion?
No, I'd second it, and it was on my list as well in the whole spirit of restoring the prior program cuts. So I support that, and I think, again, in the scheme of prioritization, this directly affects students and their ability to participate versus the small gym backboards, which, again, I mean, a convenience, but it's a convenience. And the fitness weight room carpet, I saw it. I mean, it's a little aged. You can live with it. We can live with it probably for several more years. So I agree with that. I'm not sure how it affects capital technology. I wish we could be more specific at this time, because I would hope that wouldn't impact something that, again, would directly impact the students, that we try to minimize that as much as possible. But in either case, I support the concept.
Okay. Dr. Teitel. And then, Mark, you had your hand up?
First of all, cutting maintenance is a bad idea, okay? If you insist on cutting maintenance projects, then at the very least, you ought to let us prioritize them based on the safety and need, and not substitute your judgment for them. These went through, the board had a whole discussion, it went through the board, nobody questioned these things. They're very important. To pick off maintenance projects now because you have some belief that it's not a safety hazard or it could last, that's what's gotten us into trouble before. So I do not support taking any money out of maintenance projects for any reason. I just want to be clear about that. I'm not wild about technology capital, because again, our maintenance accounts have gotten behind. And it's particularly problematic to pick off ones that individuals in their personal judgment feel can be put off. That's what's happened. We put things off, then something collapses, and we say, how come we're not proactive? And then it's a building project, and people say, how come we have a building project? How come you haven't been keeping these things up? We need to make a commitment to maintenance projects in this district, or I think we're putting kids at risk. And it's not just a matter of aesthetics. So, you know, I feel the pain on the athletic rental charges. They're in there now. I will say that I will develop a budget next year if the board so desires with them out. However, it's not clear they'll stay out, because if you get a $2 million cut, next year we may be sitting here saying, you know, those athletic rental charges, that's a pretty good way to preserve programs. Maybe we got to relook at those. So I'm committing, if the board as a whole wants them out, to build a budget that way, but you may have to address this issue again as a revenue source next year. So there's no guarantee they're going away. The only guarantee is that if the board wants it, I'll build the budget that way. But I can't object enough to cutting maintenance. That is a big mistake.
Mr. Patton, and then followed by Mr. Llewellyn.
I think the one thing that this board is fairly unified on is that nobody wants anything to do with a fee for after-school activities or sports. But the problem is that there's no money in reality to offset it. And again, I 100% agree with what Dr. Title said. I would have said it if he didn't say it. Kicking the can down the road. I'm sick of it. Enough is enough. Every year, 8 years in a row, I've seen bathrooms, painting, you name it, it gets put off. And then we argue. I remember we argued in the RTM about doing Jennings bathrooms, and a member of the RTM said, well, can we just do one bathroom or half a bathroom? I don't even remember the exact, it was ridiculous. We had arguments about cutting $20,000 of a lawnmower out of DPW, and that lasted for hours, that conversation. It was a lawnmower. It was kicking the can down the road. The lawnmower was broken, it needed to be replaced, and eventually it would have had to be replaced. So it doesn't matter when, it just, at some point that rug has to be replaced. At some point, those backboards, the cranks are not good on them. We had this conversation before. That's why the motorized project came to fruition. You know, Tom Cullen just doesn't make these things up, you know, and I agree. I don't think any member of this board is in the construction business and has the experience to say where we can do maintenance and where we can't. The flip side is, and I'm going to say it in every item and for every time tonight, everybody says, well, we're just going to go and back and cut technology. The same thing. 6 to 8 years in a row, technology gets cut. Guess what? You know, we can't do SBAC testing all at the same time because we don't have enough computers. I'm already hearing it from parents and teachers that I hear there's new technology that we're trying to buy, and you know, I'm a big Apple fan, and we're not looking at Apple products even though they're roughly the same cost. That's another story for another day. But I'm not going to cut technology for anything. Like, we need it all. I'm mad that we're going to cut the 50 computer units in world language. So I'm not for this at all. I don't want pay to play. I actually, through the chair to Dr. Title, I know this is actually not this motion yet, but I want to get this out there now. If the pay to play was expanded to all sports or all after school activities at whatever the cost is, $70, $75, A, is that even doable? And B, is there administrative costs that will...
When that motion comes up on the floor, we'll ask Dr. Title to respond to your question.
Okay, I'll stop now.
Mr. Llewellyn.
Mine's just a clarifying question. Back to Mr. Convertito's comment and Mark's comment, Mr. Patton. What's the universe of, Dr. Title, what is the universe of students participating in activities on a kind of per activity? I want to say, was it 2,200? Does that ring a bell, or is that too high?
You mean sports?
You tell me, sports or activities?
Between 2,000 and 2,200.
Okay, so it's actually $28, not 75, I think, if we're looking at the 56,000. If that frames
But
things
there's more to it than that.
Okay.
So when we get there, I can explain where the number comes from.
Okay. Thank you.
So, any further comments on this? There's a motion on the table. Any further comments on it? And then if not, we'll go to the public, and then we'll act on the motion. Mrs. Maxon Kennelly raised her hand.
For 2 years, I have spoken very adamantly against the pay-to-play. I voted against it last year. I voted to get rid of it in January, seconding Mr. Fadabean's motion at the time. And so I feel the need to explain, while it tears at me, why I would not support Mr. Fadabean's motion now. It is only because of Dr. Title's assurance that it will be out of the subsequent year's budget, and that I would fight passionately right behind him and explaining it to anyone who asked from the RTM or any other town body of why that is absolutely a wrong-headed fee to impose. I've spoken, if we're going to do it, it needs to be to all athletes, and quite frankly, if it's going to be to all athletes, there should be an extracurricular fee, period. Then, of course, you have to add in the administrative nightmare of how that would be collected, but just as an equity issue, I am completely opposed to pay for play. But that said, I also agree with Mr. Patton's point. I do, and with Dr. Title's point, in terms of take care of the maintenance projects now. That I know that we discussed this in January, that there was a major vetting process in central office in terms of other projects being eliminated, and that these rose to the top as the necessary ones on which we would focus this year. And I want to maintain that commitment and send the message to the other town boards that this is something we have to stay on top of. That all we need is that one accident, that one faculty member whose back gets hurt, that one kid who trips and hits a head, and it rose to this level for some reason. We supported it in January. I support those now, even as I wholeheartedly agree with absolutely everything Mr. Fadabean said about wanting to eliminate this. I am only voting against it with the assurance that it is out of next year's budget.
Any other final comments before we go to the public? Mr. Patton, final comment?
Actually, a quick question through the chair to Dr. Title, if he knows. I guess every sport is different. Hockey is not the same as a bowling, I guess. But what does the average student pay per sport now with the
There's a range, I'm sure.
No, it's just a flat fee. What is it? Is it $200? What is it, Greg? 200?
It's a tiered system. It's 2 tiers.
2 tiers?
2 tiers,
I don't know what it
2
is.
to 250.
200 and 250? 200 and 250.
Okay, so it's roughly
right now. I mean, most pay-to-play, full-blown pay-to-pay in systems do have a differential based on the cost of the sport, and often, in fact, you know, the original pay-to-play proposal that I put out several years ago that was worth about $300,000 had tiers in it, which mirrored what other districts do. So there is a precedent. It's very common practice to charge different amounts to different sports depending on the cost of those sports. That's just, but the current one right now is impacting, you know, a certain number of sports, and it's 200 to 250.
So we will now go to the public on the amendment that Mr. Fadabean suggested, which is to remove the $56,000 item from Dr. Title's list of budget adjustments and add to Dr. Title's list of budget adjustments the 3 items. One is the fitness rug for $20,314, the electronic backboards, the basketball backboards, $18,495, and the balance would come out of capital technology, $17,195. Are there 191. Are there members of the public that wish to comment on that motion, that amendment motion? Please state your name and address.
Suzanne Miska, 123 Reigate Road. Pay to play. It needs to not be a revenue source. We have parking as a revenue source. Once something becomes a revenue source, it never goes away. Between you and me, I tend to doubt that what we saw this year in the town, as far as the Board of Education budget, is not going to replay itself until the economy really takes one heck of an upturn. And so to think that we can make promises that we probably won't be able to keep is not the direction that I would suggest we go in. My biggest concern of this whole discussion was that it's $75 versus $28, and maybe, in all due respect, I know I'm not allowed to ask a question, but maybe we can go and revisit which is the right amount. You know, I appreciate the flooring at the ward weight room. Believe me, I'm sure the Ludlow weight room looks equally as tired. I appreciate rugs in the libraries. I know they look tired. I've seen the one at Ludlow. It probably too can use some you know, TLC. But I keep going down this road where we're asking our students to continue to pay in on this. I mean, I don't mean to be disrespectful to Fairfield Woods lockers. I'm sure they're important. Can we take a little bit off them and keep technology? I mean, at some point, we are going to have to make some choices. But to keep hitting the revenue off the kids at the high school, I mean, I think we need to step back and really find another way of doing it. And I would support Mr. Fedderby, I hope you all do.
Thank you. Please state your name and address.
Hi, Ellen Jacob, RTM, District 9. I don't know if this is a help. I'm here to offer it. Just looking through some of the projects, it hasn't been mentioned, and maybe it's because I came late. So the HVAC sound screen at Fairfield Woods, that project, and I think I don't know, is the principal here tonight, because he was so gracious and we did look at a few things together. That seemed to be of substantial savings if it could be put off. We couldn't hear the sound, and the principal had noted that there weren't any complaints made to him. So is that something that could help you out? The other thing is the Ward Library rug did not, I mean, it looked better than the rugs in my house. So I don't think it's definitely not the way you want it, but it doesn't seem like a safety thing or an issue that was such an eyesore. So I just wanted to offer that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. State your name and address.
Hi, Jeannie Pasowitz, 355 Sigwin Drive. I am not in favor of pay-to-play. I feel that the students have already been charged the parking fee. If we continue to, if we do charge every student, I will believe that there will be a drop in participation. I believe last year Dr. Title had mentioned that the state of Connecticut was looking into eliminating that a bill may be passed because of a drop in participation in those towns and cities. So please, I ask you not to support pay-to-play and support Mr. Fadabean's motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. State your name and address.
Trudy Durrell, 64 Woodcrest Road. And I hope that you'll give me just a smidgen of latitude because I cannot stay too much longer. So, since I can't leave my 12-year-old home too much longer alone. But I wanted to take a moment, first of all, to once again thank Dr. Title for that, what I consider to be an impressive list of proposed revisions to the Board of Education budget, which is now necessary to meet the reductions placed on this board by decisions made by other town bodies. And while unfortunate to make any of the revisions, I do think that it needs to be mentioned that Dr. Title managed to determine those reductions without impacting programs or significantly detrimentally having an effect on instruction or reducing current personnel. I would ask that you accept the revisions as proposed by Dr. Title. I have very, very similar philosophical issues with pay-to-play. However, spreading out the costs of paying for the sports among all of the athletes rather than merely some, while I hate to have to put it in, athletics are in fact extracurricular. They are not curricular, nor are they capital, nor are they maintenance, and I hope you can still hear me with the feedback. Thank you. So thus, while it does pain me, I would support a proposal similar to that which Mr. Convertito put forth for a flat fee per student athlete. And in general, I trust that you as a board will take the suggestions of Dr. Title, your educational leader,
as you move forward and make these challenging and now regrettably necessary decisions. Thank you.
And all within 2 minutes, so you didn't need extra time at all. State your name and address, please.
Good evening, I'm Viney Noor, 83 Alberta Street, and I'd like to echo what Trudy said. I'm a parent of a current pay-to-play swimmer who gets to swim at LA Fitness during the season, where the pool is too warm, where there are no starting blocks. But I'm okay, and I will be swallowing this pill another year to have to pay for him to participate in subpar conditions, if it means to not cut any other programs, and if it keeps the program, the budget balanced. I too do not like pay to play. I do wish we could all participate in anything without having to dig into our pockets. But I also wish for teenagers to have something to do, and if that means we have to pay for it, that's fine. I also have a student currently in 5th grade who had diminished music education, and he is okay. And while I would prefer to have more music, more language instruction at an earlier age, I'm okay with the budget as amended by Dr. Title, and I hope that you support your educational leader. Thank you.
Thank you. We welcome you back to the boardroom, such as it is, but the rules still apply. Please state your name and address, and you're limited to 2 minutes.
Thank you. Pamela Iacono. I am a member of the RTM in District 9. I'm here to read a statement from the RTM Budget Director, Joe Palmer, who had to leave. I know I made your job harder by voting to reduce the Board of Ed budget. I don't take that lightly, especially considering the emotions surrounding the reductions in the school district. I also don't take lightly the pressure we placed on Dr. Title on the night of the RTM budget vote. Members of the Republican caucus very publicly put the onus on Dr. Title to formulate a pragmatic set of recommendations to absorb these reductions. We expressed confidence in his ability as a manager, his understanding of the district's budget, and his overall professionalism. To his credit, Dr. Title quickly responded with a solution-oriented and creative proposal that takes advantage of savings based on more recent analysis of key budget drivers while avoiding broad changes to services and programming. His ability to do so quickly, produce a plan like this, shows he clearly has a solid, ongoing command of this budget and its tolerances, and he understands how his recommendations will impact the district. I trust the superintendent's judgment that it is a solid plan that will cause the least amount of disruption to the district and will help those and those who were heavily involved move beyond this budget once and for all. Please support Dr. Title, and please support his adjustments as recommended. That is from our leader, our budget director, the RTM Republican caucus. Thank you.
Thank you. Please state your name and address. It will help me for timing purposes to know who else may be interested in speaking. So if you line up, that will give me a judge as to the meeting time.
Eric Newman, 85 Eastfield Drive, RTM District 7. I'm against the pay to play. First of all, to have it in just say 2 years. State of Connecticut had a similar situation back in the 80s. They're going to have an income tax for 2 years. Several decades later, we still have the income tax. My colleagues on the RTM, we saved the town taxpayers $48, yet we're going to be taxing the participants in the school system who play sports $400. You know, you have 2 children probably in the high school. These things add up. Where was the savings? Now, you know, and over 4 years, it's going to cost $1,700 to play 3 sports. And how are you supposed to tell a child, oh, you know, you can only pick one of your sports. You can't try that new sport. And, you know, it's just not right. I would go against, you know, I wouldn't be supporting the pay to play and continue working. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Please state your name and address.
This is Joanna Fanar, 57 Riverside Drive, District 10. And again, thank you so much for considering this. I again want to bring up a couple of points. One point that is I find quite disturbing, as I'm a new parent in Fairfield Public Schools, that transparency has been a big word lately. What I'm learning, starting with our larger issues with RTM and talking about transparency, and just our basic public right to understand what is going to be considered here. And we are going into this right now and finding certain surprises. Right now, discussing items in terms of replacements and stuff like that. For instance, recommendations and breaking it down item by item. Second is that the budget was cut in spite of the bipartisan support earlier by 800,000, and then we had an additional 500,000. And I'm very happy to see a lot of RTM members here tonight who did support the cut and who did not support the cut, and they're here advocating for Dr. Title's adjustments to this budget. So thank you so much. I hope you consider that as well as the public comments tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. And are you the final speaker on this amendment? I don't see anybody standing, so I'll assume you're the final speaker. Please state your name and address.
Thank you. Laura Devlin, 85 Brett Lane, RTM District 3. I would also like to ask that you support the budget as proposed, as Dr. Title has put forth. And I applaud Dr. Title for identifying adjustments that do not impact student programming. Thank you.
Thank you. Back to the board. Are we ready to act on Mr. Fatabean's motion? Mr. Convertito.
Yeah, I just want the board to be clear. I will not be putting my motion forward. And the reason I won't be is because that $75 fee includes additional infrastructure costs to administer that plan in the term of additional administrative assistance to be able to administer it across 2,200 athletes, which is what the differential is between the $28 that you quoted on 2,200 athletes and the cost to do that. So just so people are aware, I'm not about to put forward a motion to put in more compound growth into the budget. So I will not be making that motion.
Thank you very much. Any other comments on the motion in front of us at the moment? Mr. Fatabean.
Point of order, was the chair going to give the courtesy to the mover to speak last?
I haven't called for the vote, so anybody that raises their hand gets to speak. So if you wish to speak last, anybody else wish to speak on this motion? On this motion? Mr. Llewellyn.
I have a question to follow up on Mr. Convertito, and it's related to this motion because it is the either or here. Can you explain, please, that $47 upcharge or whatever that is, and is that in the current system? Do we have an administrative overhead cost associated with the current system?
Right, so
in order to inform your vote on this motion, you would like the answer to that question. Correct.
Yes.
So, Mr.
Yeah, so right now we're charging a very small number of athletes. It's a very small number of sports. It affects a relatively small number of athletes, and we're absorbing it. To go from the number of athletes to charging all of the athletes will require additional staff to be hired to administer this. So first of all, you have to start with, say, the 2,000 athletes that we have. You have to subtract off anywhere from 10 to 15% who will qualify for waivers under free and reduced lunch. Plus, there is evidence that when you charge everybody, there's anywhere from a 5%, maybe a 5% drop off in participation. So you're down to about 1,600 that you can be sure you're going to collect the fee from. And then you're talking about, that's a huge number of athletes every single year before every sport you have to collect this sum of money. And my estimate is that you will need a secretarial position, 1 FTE, salary and benefits, in order just to administer this program and track down the money from people and hound people and make sure all the accounting is done correctly. And whether that position is, added to the current level. Right now, the athletic directors have a half-time secretary. They split a secretary. That person is not in the position of being able to just take this on. So we would need to add to those positions. So that adds, so that your revenue, in other words, you've got a, those are the two parts to it.
Nope, that helps.
Okay, does that help?
Yeah, no, tremendously.
Unless some member of this board wants to volunteer to collect 2,000 bills. Any other comments? If not, I'll have Mr. Fattabine go last, and then we will vote.
Thank you. My comments to support this motion is that I understand the concern for deferred maintenance and the desire not to have deferred maintenance. But in my opinion, on balance, the relatively minor aspect of not replacing a carpet in 1 year or not motorizing what is a manual system currently is not necessarily going to substantially alter or modify or put in jeopardy the district's maintenance program. We have been diligent in maintenance of our facilities. We have spent a considerable amount of money maintaining our facilities. And on balance, just to use the position that maintenance will suffer and we shouldn't do it is not necessarily the only answer in this situation. And I think it's sort of not the best response, in my opinion. So I would certainly support this motion, primarily because I made it.
Okay. Mr. Fattabine wanted to be the final speaker, but Mr. Patton does want to make a quick comment.
And I will apologize to Mr. Fattabine.
We have a lot of more motions to
It
go
was not my
through.
intent, but I will just say that maintenance aside, on the technology front, $17,000 or $18,000 is 30-plus computers for 30 classrooms, smart boards or projectors for 5 or 6 classrooms. Those are important things that affect students and programs directly.
Thank you. If we're ready for a vote, Mr. Fattabine's motion is to remove the $56,000 from the list of budget adjustments and to replace that with the 3 items previously mentioned, the fitness rug, $20,314, the electronic backboards, $18,495, and the balance to come from capital technology, $17,191. All in favor of that motion, raise your hand. Mrs. Lou McCormick, Mr. Fattabine, Mr. Llewellyn, all opposed. Mr. Convertito, Ms. Carnell, Mrs. Gerber, Mr. Dwyer, Mrs. Maxon Kennelly, and Mr. Patton. The motion fails 3-6, correct? Now, you still have the floor, but perhaps if you're not ready to suggest a counterbalancing number, do you want me to move on to somebody else and then come back to you, or what is your wish?
I'm in an effort to speed things up.
Okay.
I would think it may be best to make a motion to divide one item.
Okay, after we've done with all the amendments, I promise to come back to you to divide that one item as a motion, so we can deal with that as an administrative matter just prior to the vote. I think that means, Ms. Lou McCormick, any suggestions that you have?
Well, given that my recommendation includes the pay-to-play elimination, I don't know if it's duplicative, however, my offset against it would be different. So I could see that much of the board was not supportive of necessarily the offsets, but everyone seemed to be reluctant to institute pay-to-play. Is that correct? Because I don't want to be duplicative. If people actually don't want pay-to-play, then I'll remove it from my motion. But if it's that the offset was the problem, then I will continue with pay-to-play inclusive of my addition.
One of the difficulties of that, only half of the question, is that each board member might not know, they won't know what your offsets are, and so therefore it would be hard for them to respond to whether they would want to or not.
Right, no, my question was, were they just opposed to pay-to-play?
What you might want to do is advance a motion for whatever other ideas you have, and then treat the pay-to-play as a separate item, and let me give some thought as to whether that's whether it makes sense to do that, since we've already acted on that as a decision.
Right, that's what I wanted to understand.
So I would suggest that since we've already acted on that as a decision, that probably it doesn't make sense to address it, but I'll give it to the board after you make your motion, and Ms. Carnell, if she wants to make a motion, makes hers, we can come back to you and see if the board is amenable to looking at a different way of covering that $56,000. So first, on your main issue.
Okay, because I grouped things together to make the discussion shorter, and again, the motivation for my recommendation is to And
Before you discuss the rationale for it, I need a motion on the table that says,
so my motion
that
is
there's
to
a balanced
restore
motion.
some prior program cuts, which were inclusive of the pay-to-play, which was $56,000, the middle
well, let's
school.
take that out of it. Remember,
Well, I'll list them all, and you can separate it, we can add it back, whatever you want to do. It was the high school pay-to-play of 56, it was the middle school gifted of 40,000, it was the fifth grade music, to restore that to 34,000 as it was cut. Restore the gifted assessment to second and fourth grade, because it was again cut.
no, just the numbers, so we can get the...
With 22,700. To instate the grammar assessment, which would include the pre-assessment, progress assessment, and post-assessment, K through 8, for 9,768. To incorporate the school climate tips, anonymous reporting recommendation for $5,000 as an offset to that $20,000 that had been taken out of the budget. And I don't know if I need to include the Board of Ed training, but I'll add it in. I don't need to include it, so I can exclude that because it will be included, which is late. Or shall I officially
So you want
include
to
it?
add those expenses back into the budget?
Correct. So that list
No,
adds
before you-
up to...
Before you do it, Ms. Monsell, can you confirm the number of the 40,000, the 34,000, the 22,700, the 9,758, and the 5,000? And let's see if our numbers match.
And the Board of Ed training, I had officially
Did you
added
want to add it or not?
Yes.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, so the 2,400. I know that you kind of unofficially, but I might as well just officially add it.
Make sure I have them right. 5,000, 22,700, 40,000, 34,000, 9,768, 2,400.
Said 68 or 58?
9768. I think that's the number
It's
that was
68.
presented to me.
9,768.
Yeah?
Is pay to play in there or not?
No.
So we don't want to...
It's removed as
It'll
a
be a
cut.
separate motion.
With pay to play out as a cut, you would need to cut another 169,868.
No, that's not right.
40,000
Yeah.
plus 24,000.
34.
34,000 plus 22,700 plus 9,768 plus 5,000 plus 2,400. That adds up to
113,868.
Yeah, that's right.
okay. And the difference being the pay-to-play question.
Correct.
Okay. And so therefore, the offsetting 113,868 that you would propose is?
And so I can do this in two ways. So my recommendation...
No, there's one way. We need a motion that says,
So,
here's clearly what...
Let me explain why I say that, because before, Dr. Title had recommended that rather than specify particular capital improvements, he said, I'd rather just be able to make the judgment call on it. So I will say that I would like it to be in the transportation, where there would be an offsetting transportation adjustment. I would suggest that after review, that would be the 3 additional pre-K buses.
And how much are you saying?
Which would offset the 113.
The entire amount would come out of transportation?
Correct. 3 additional pre-K buses would be 127,564, so it's more than is necessary.
Okay. So the motion that Ms. Lou
But
McCormick
it could
wants...
come out of transport, and so, can I just want to finish my motion, okay, before we isolate it down completely. If in fact, Dr. Title believes that the pre-K busing within transportation, there's some flexibility in that, and that I'm bringing it to the broader transportation area because, to throw out this idea, we could also, because we have parking as a revenue source, there's also the idea of having, I don't know if this is possible or not, but students can elect or sign a waiver to not take buses.
No, they can't.
And if they don't take...
Point of order, this is, again, discussion on a motion that has been made yet. You have to
I
be
need to get the
specific.
motion in front of us first.
I'm trying to, okay,
Yeah,
so
okay.
that's my motion, it's against the
The
transportation.
motion that Ms. Lou McCormick is putting on is to add middle school gifted, add the music, Add the gifted assessment, the grammar assessment, the climate survey at 5,000, and the BOE training at 113,868, and take it from transportation, focused on pre-K buses, 113,868. Is there a second for that motion? Is there a second? Mr. Llewellyn wishes to second it. So, while you've made some argument, do you wish to make any further argument on this as a motion?
Yes, so I will clarify, because again, I believe that when you stack up all of these programs and how many students are affected and how valuable they are and how really this board's number one, I think, mission is to strive for higher student achievement, that these programs, to me, on a priority list, rise higher than transportation. And while I view transportation as important, but in particular for the pre-K busing, it is not a requirement that we have to fulfill. It is an incentive for a program that is not required, but one that is beneficial to us in specifically to address the McKinley racial imbalance, which is at McKinley alone, not at the other neighboring schools. And by still allowing 2 pre-K buses to exist, it adequately accounts for the McKinley population and allows them that incentive so that our racial imbalance issues are not impacted. And I think the rest of it is, like I said, an incentive. It's nice to have, it's lovely to have. I know people who use it. It is lovely. It's just that it's lovely. It's not required. Everybody else buses their kids to pre-K. I think, aside, if it wasn't for the racial imbalance issue, we shouldn't be having this transportation at all. It's not required by us to provide pre-K. It's not required by us to provide the transportation. We are willing to already provide the pre-K. The transportation is a perk. And to make sure we don't impact our racial imbalance solution, I think that allowing the 2 buses is great, but in order to restore these programs, I think cutting the additional 3 is allowable. And I am willing to make, to be open to other substitution transportation items if Dr. Title feels that he has items within there that he views are less of a priority than that. So I am open to that.
And as the seconder, Mr. Llewellyn, do you wish to make any comments? You don't have to. I'm just going to you out of courtesy.
You know, one of the other items in here to offset the cost is what we talked about before, but I know people aren't interested in, is the middle school stipend. But that is approximately the same amount as opposed to the transportation, and that too would reinstate the programs. I think it was last year before budget season that the 200 was approved for the busing that may have resulted in some of these changes. But I think that it's an all or nothing as it relates to the busing. And you know, if people aren't comfortable with this, I think we should reverse the 42, but I don't think we should be targeting a particular subset.
Any other comments on this as a reduction from the board? Dr. Title?
Well, I have a lot to say about this if the board is going to seriously entertain it.
Well,
Okay, but I guess I got to go through it. Okay. Well, I think I've said everything I want to say about pre-K busing. I don't want to repeat myself. I think that, although I guess I have to, I guess that it's an integral part of our racial imbalance plan that's filed with the state, and that I think it would be very detrimental to the program, to the other purposes of the program, and to offer it just to McKinley kids because they're part of the racial imbalance, I think is a huge change from what we've done. So the offset bothers me greatly. I also think that middle school, if we're going to get into that, if that's going to be the next item, middle school liaisons are critical. They're team leaders. They work extra hours for this money. They do programs for kids. They're the liaison between the kids and the team and the parents. They perform a whole host of duties. And on a per-person basis, it's a relatively small amount of money. Just we have a lot of them. That's why it comes to a big amount of money. So let me go through the other ones. First of all, the middle school gifted program was never on the agenda. It was never discussed by the board as an enhancement. This is an enhancement to an existing program. this is out of the blue. It was proposed in the last budget cycle, I proposed to enhance the gifted program above where it was, and then we had the big budget cut and we went back to status quo. So this actually is not just reinstating a program, this is a program improvement on top of the existing program. Because that number comes from the previous budget. The fifth grade music, we are working with the music teachers to figure out how we can implement this twice a week so that we can get as much done as possible. But I will tell you that instructional time in the core areas is extremely valuable. We keep saying how we have to do more with language arts, we have to do more with English language arts, we have to do more with math, and our fifth grades is really a time where kids are pulled out for a lot of different things. So this is as much an instructional time issue as it is a budget issue. We are working with the music staff to see if we can't have the classes still meet twice a week, but do a little bit more with the curriculum, and those talks are ongoing. Gifted assessment, the board took action on this in January. It was proposed and voted down, where there were no offsets. So why would you want to do more gifted assessment? I just don't see the value in that. The grammar assessments and English language arts issue, that's part of the curriculum implementation, that if the teachers in their implementation of grammar want to have an assessment, then that will be in the curriculum implementation budget. I think that's jumping the gun and perhaps a discussion for when language arts comes back, but, and school climate, again, that's an enhancement over what we had, and the Board of Ed thing I think we can handle. So those are my thoughts. Obviously, as I've said to people, anybody who's asked, what's your opinion going to be if I make a proposal? My opinion is going to be I'm opposed to it. It doesn't matter who makes it, because I think I've given you the best possible list. So I just want to give you the reasons why I wouldn't be in favor of these and either offset that are brought out there. So that's just a quick run through on it. If the board's going to really get into it, then we might have to have some other people come up and speak about some of these issues. But I just...
shall we go to the public and then come back for continued board debate? Okay. For the motion that is currently on the table, which is to add back in middle school gifted enhancement at $40,000, the fifth grade music class at $34,000, additional gifted assessments at $22,700, grammar assessments at $97.68, a budget item for a climate survey of $5,000, and Board of Ed training at $2,400, and the offset is to reduce transportation costs by the equal amount of $113,868, pre-K busing. So please state your name and address and comment on this motion and this motion only. Thank you.
Elizabeth Courtney, 190 Acorn Lane in Southport. I applaud Mrs. Lou McCormick. I feel that if you have to look philosophically at a perk of pre-K busing to people who can afford it, there are hundreds of people in town who everyone carts their kids to school. That small number, possibly 20 children full pay, versus the enormous number of children who would benefit from direct enhancements to programs. To me, it's a no-brainer. Specifically, music and world languages, which I commented on earlier, which is not addressed. But music is extremely important. I'm frankly very shocked and disappointed to hear the superintendent's opinion that one gifted assessment is sufficient, because the gifted assessment is currently the gateway to all sorts of opportunities for advanced math. And if you don't do well on that one particular test on that one particular day, you're really out of luck in Fairfield. And so to add back in something which is a standard, which is recommended by many other groups, I feel that these are well thought out recommendations, and I hope the board will take them seriously. If not, and I hope they will not vote them down as a blanket. If they have problems with a particular thing, take these out one by one, because I think there's a lot of value in here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Any further speakers? Please state your name and address.
Kelly Crisp, 194 Paper Mill Road. I strongly urge each of you to consider school climate as part of this budget. School climate impacts all of our children. It impacts our staff. It impacts our parents. It impacts the working conditions under which our staff operates, and quite frankly, the working conditions that our children operate under. I began speaking about the need to comply with state law that mandates that school districts enable students to anonymously report their concerns. I brought this up in the fall multiple times in emails because of the, we'll just say, challenges that we faced as a school district, particularly at Fairfield Ludlow High School. I also brought this up when I emailed the board and various members of our education community about the hostile Tumblr account that I tried to get removed. In addition, I began speaking about this at the school climate district team last meeting, formally presenting. The meeting prior to that, I spoke about it at length. Last meeting in May, Karen Parks was part of the conversation, so this shouldn't be something new. And when the school climate budget was zeroed out, I was very surprised because we still have a school climate survey that's due and we must comply by state law. The school climate survey that's offered by the state, as I said in my email, is only 19 questions, 4 of which are demographics, 1 of which is an open comment. It is not recommended by our state school climate leader. It is woefully, woefully awful and has no bearing on a student-teacher relationship.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Crisp. Please state your name and address.
Hi, I'm Kim Fahey. I live at 88 Overhill Road in Fairfield. And I just wanted to get up and kind of talk about the preschool transportation. You know, I think the preschool programs are great programs. I think they should continue on. My daughter's actually attending one of them. I just feel that the transportation is above and beyond what this town needs to pay for. All of the other parents drive their kids in. I'm a social worker personally, so I know about racial imbalance and I understand what you're trying to do, but I feel like it's above and beyond what this town needs to do. I appreciate the preschool programs and I think they should continue.
Thank you. And do I see anybody else moving forward? Are you two last speakers? Please state your name and address.
Yes, Kelly Jacobson, 335 Acorn Lane in Southport. I'd also like to applaud Mrs. Lou McCormick on putting forth a sound recommendation. For a couple months now, I've been hearing so many people from Fairfield arguing against budget cuts because they feared programs being cut from their kids. And I believe this is a really sound recommendation to put programs back in for our children at the expense of primarily some buses for a preschool program. Let's step back and look at that preschool program for a second. We spend a lot of money, and I just wonder, a lot of things have been mentioned here tonight about why these preschool programs in place. In part one is to help solve for the racial imbalance at McKinley. Another is to provide preschool education at reduced or no tuition for people who need it, and I applaud those reasons. But I wonder, is anybody really analyzing what's actually happening with the buses and the transportation and the numbers that are going on here? If we're spending $250,000 for 5 buses, how many people are we actually transporting that really need it? And so I would highly recommend that even if this motion isn't put forth, that somebody, that you really take to heart that somebody needs to stand back and do a thorough analysis of what's happening. Because I am certain that the people that have been arguing about not cutting programs for kids do not want to see money wasted in empty buses running around town for kids that don't really need it.
Thank you very much. Please state your name and address.
Tricia Donovan, 164 Tainer Drive. I came here tonight expecting a very fluid, dynamic conversation, and actually what I'm hearing back here is it's my way or the highway. I would expect more collaboration, more thought, and more give and take to save programming and save the education for our children. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Back to the board. Any comments? And then I'll go to the maker of the motion to give her the last word, Mr. Convertito.
through the chair to Dr. Title. On the two plans that we have filed with the state for the racial imbalance, does it include, is the busing portion included in the plan? And if so, will we have to go back and revise the plan and get approval from the state?
I don't know if busing was specifically mentioned in the plan, but that's how we've carried it out. So I think it would be considered a substantial change, and I think it would be something we'd at least have to notify the state that the board's made a substantial change to the racial imbalance plan, which we are required to do. It's really hard to gauge the impact of that, and again, I think there's real questions about, because this doesn't completely eliminate it. The proposal eliminates it for everybody but McKinley kids. McKinley kids would still get it. It's not eliminating every bus. And there's no other transportation money to be found, so this is not like maintenance projects where I can say, do project A, project B. You know, all the transportation money that's in there we need. I think that the board is jeopardizing the racial imbalance plan filed with the state. That's my opinion. And it's, you know, that's...
If that's the case, then we were only to supply buses to the McKinley students. Isn't there a chance that we open ourselves up to liability from other parents saying, wait a minute, why don't I get the same right as a parent at McKinley?
Well, of course. But I think
if I said I'm not going to run buses to Sherman School,
right,
okay, but I'm going to run them to every other school,
right, it'd be a problem.
It would be a problem, right?
Right. You know, it's as much as it galls people, providing transportation or providing a service or something based on income on a sliding scale is generally recognized as being something that is allowable. You know, we do make considerations for free or reduced, but to carve out, you know, one territory and provide buses only there, I think opens us up to more issues. I just think there's just a lot to absorb in this, that part. I think it's problematic. Just, you know, my view.
I mean, that being said, I mean, if we want to revisit how we're dealing with racial imbalance, I have no problem as a board member dealing with that. But I can't support a motion that just shoestrings everything in on this racial imbalance plan and could put it in jeopardy without knowing that there's something else out there to back it up. So I can't support this motion.
No further comments. Ms. Lou McCormick, do you wish to make the last comment?
Yeah, I find it surprising that everyone's so concerned that by removing transportation to people outside of McKinley when the racial imbalance issue is within McKinley, that jeopardizes our plan regarding the McKinley racial imbalance. There is some sort of a contrary attachment that's going on there, and I feel that it is not... I just don't think it's a prudent decision. I don't know that this is a fiscally responsible decision because I've seen these buses run empty, largely empty, around town. I think even the bus drivers acknowledge that it is a little unusual to bus around one child, a $42,000 bus, busing one child back and forth. And so in my opinion, at the end of the day, this is a question of whether we are willing to make changes to our current practices in order to be willing to incorporate programs that we all wish we hadn't cut. We all say we wish we hadn't cut, and here is an opportunity to reintroduce them. And yet still, I feel reluctance from this board to make any changes in order to restore programs, and yet we all commit to saying that we want to restore programs. So I will again say that I've examined this, I've thought about this very carefully. I've asked many questions around this. I've even gone out and watched the buses myself. And I think that this is a very fiscally prudent decision. I think this will be a very low impact on the racial imbalance issue. I think both issues will be addressed. I know it will impact some parents. Anytime you cut something, it will impact some people. But for the larger good of our community and the number of programs that touch so many students that will be saved or enhanced, to me, this is a no no-brainer, and clearly it's not a no-brainer for this board, which I find, again, very baffling.
Thank you. With that being the final comment, Mrs. Maxon Kennelly.
And I apologize and absolutely would hope if Ms. Lou McCormick had a follow-up to anything I said, I hope that she would as the maker of the motion. But I'm also troubled whenever I feel that implicitly or not, that I could be labeled as fiscally not responsible or as not responsive to the program needs that we have. And I do think that in going through this list of the middle school gifted, the 5th grade music, the gifted assessment, the grammar assessment, the school climate for 5,000, and the CABE, I think there's a little more controversy there than just simply, oh, this is something we all said we wanted, and that Mrs. Lou McCormick has found a way to give us 9 what we wanted. I think that is a little bit of a logical fallacy there, because in fact we don't. We voted some of these things out. I think some of these represent excellent ideas. I'm not questioning that, and yet we voted them out for a reason based on other discussions. And so to revisit that discussion, I'm not saying that they're not worthwhile at all. But this isn't a case of a tit for tat of, you wanted this, I found a way to give it to you. I don't think it's quite that simple. And regarding the transportation itself, number one, the public comment that this would call for a thorough analysis of the pre-K busing, I couldn't agree more with that. I absolutely agree that there might be room in here to do something more efficiently, and I would like it examined, but I don't know that we can do it as part of this vote. But I completely agree that that is something worth looking at. If there are buses out there with one student on them consistently, and we're paying $42,000, that absolutely, I would agree, needs to be examined. I do get some troubling images in mind, having grown up outside of Boston, when I think about the notion of a bus coming in with those students coming in on it. I find that very troubling, and that this could lend itself to that. I do think this pre-K serves so many goods, both in terms of the racial imbalance and addressing the achievement gap, where we are targeting an audience that we know that giving them access to the means of academic improvement will be directly impacting the achievement gap. I don't view this transportation, if it is achieving that, as anything that is absolutely not just a perk. It's not just something which is lovely to be able to offer. Addressing that achievement gap is something that we as a board should absolutely be concerned with. And until I know that this won't pull away from that, I would view this as impacting student programming, because those students later without this pre-K, if this somehow denies them access, because that goes beyond McKinley, that would be free and reduced lunch at other, for students at other schools. And to think that this might involve them losing out on the program, I think that in itself could be short-sighted, and that's something we'd be making up for later in kindergarten, first, second, etc. Again, I applaud the fact that Ms. Lou McCormick came to the table with, I would like this back, and I have the offsets, and all the numbers are here. But until I know more about how that would impact it beyond racial imbalance, I would have a hard time supporting this.
Thank you. Anything you wish to close out with, or shall we move to action?
I do want to add that when putting this list together, I was really trying to earmark programs that had been recommended and cut before. So I wasn't just pulling things from the air. The grammar one came specifically from my attending some of the ELA discussions and hearing like an outpour all around the table about the grammar. So that made its way on here, and the cost was not prohibitive. The other ones were eliminated after having been proposed or being part of our budget for many years before. So, you know, I assumed that we would all have hoped that these programs would not have been cut if we could have saved them. And that was my assumption. If I assumed wrong, I apologize. I generally prioritize almost all student programs unless we feel that they're truly frivolous. But I would assume that most of these are not, and that we would have hoped to have been able to save them. So I include them for that reason. And again, I go back to, I hear your hesitation around the pre-K busing and how it'll impact the overall program. I think the only way we're going to really know is if we try it one year and see, and by doing so, we isolate McKinley and make sure McKinley is not impacted so we don't touch the racial imbalance issue. The other issue, if in fact we see that there is an issue, I mean, these numbers are big, but they're not that big in the scheme of a $156 million budget. We can reinstitute in the following year, similar to the concept about pay to play. We have it, we can take it away next year. We have the power to be able to adjust. I just feel that in this instance, what we are forsaking for that benefit is too much. It's too much. And I don't think that this district can afford that.
Thank you. If we're now ready for a vote, the motion on the table is to add the following 6 programs: the middle school gifted improvement, 40,000, the 5th grade music at 34,000, the gifted assessments at 22,700, the grammar assessment at 9768, the climate put $5,000 into that line, and the Board of Ed training at 2,400, the offset being transportation 113,868. Do board members understand the motion in front of you? Ms. Carnell.
I understand that. I have a question. In terms of the busing, do we have any idea of how many students use the bus daily? I know that may be too much detail and not have the numbers handy.
No, we have it.
Yeah, there's like 67, is that the
Right.
60.
Yeah.
I will tell you that
67
John
would be enough.
Fickey does everything a human being can do to economize our buses. It is a very complicated thing. These are little children. You cannot put 25 of them on the bus and run them around for an hour. And if there's any way to economize on any aspect of our busing, we always are looking at that, and John is a master at it.
But 67 is the, and it's plus or minus, I'm sure, different days and
Right.
whatnot, but that's the number. Okay, if we're ready for action, all in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Ms. Lou McCormick? Mr. Llewellyn? All opposed? Mr. Convertito? Ms. Carnell? Mrs. Gerber? Mr. Dwyer? Mr. Fattabine? Mrs. Maxon Kennelly? Mr. Patton? The motion fails 2-7. So I'm going to ask this question of the board. I know for me, the action I took on Mr. The action I took on Mr. Fattabine's motion about the 56,000 was not based on the offsets that he chose. It was, I'm going to stand pat with the current system and then look forward to the following year. And so just if you put a motion forward that said, here's the same 56,000, but I found different ways to cover it, it would not have impacted my vote. And if you're looking for guidance from the board as to whether you should put that forward or not, I would invite other board members to comment as to whether that was true. Mr. Fattabine, you wanted to comment on either my question
I want to make
or
a
my
motion.
question.
My
Your
motion would be to divide the question. I want to divide out and try and expedite divide out the busing of the elimination of one pre-K bus for full tuition students. I want to divide that out from the remainder of the list so we can vote on the whole list except for that one item, and then have some discussion on that one item because I think that one item merits some discussion.
So first, I would say that the motion to divide, if there's unanimous consent for that, then we won't need to go through a motion process. But if there's anybody here that objects to saying we'll vote for the entire list without the eliminate one pre-K bus line item, and the eliminate one pre-K bus line item will be its separate motion. That's what Mr. Fattabine's proposal is.
Right. Divide the question.
Yes, to divide the question, so there are two different questions. Is there any objection to dividing the question?
Actually, point of clarification.
If there's no objection, we'll consider it by unanimous consent.
Can I have a point of clarification?
Sure.
When we were going through, I thought we were going in an order.
Well,
so
yes.
this jumps the order?
Well, Mr. Fattabine asked for the floor, and I gave it to him, and I had asked him to withhold this until we got to the final person, which was the 56,000 here, and Ms. Carnell, if she decides to put something forward.
But I'd want to put something different forward, so that...
I would be willing to withdraw my dividing the question.
Okay. So I will get back to you.
I thought we were sort of done with the...
I'm not sure that we are. And when I talked to you
I'll
earlier,
draw
Mr.
that.
Llewellyn, I asked if you would be putting something forward, and I didn't hear.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought I said I did.
Oh, you did?
I thought
Okay,
I
I'm
did. I
sorry, I
apologize.
didn't. I heard the word no.
Nope.
So I have to add. So, to give Ms. Lou McCormick guidance as to whether to pursue her version of the 56,000, are board members willing to consider that, or was their vote similar to mine? It wasn't the offsets, it was just, we're going to stand pat the way we are. Just to give her guidance so that we don't waste her time or our time re-arguing essentially the same point. Any comments from people? Okay, so having no comments from people, you have no guidance. What do you wish to do? So think about it, and I'll go to Ms. Carnell, okay? Or do you want to?
Well, can I actually have a separate,
Well, I may help you out here.
Oh, you want to help?
May-
Ms. Carnell. Can I go to Ms. Carnell?
Thank you. In terms of Ms. McCormick's suggestion about middle school gifted, fifth grade music, hours restored, restore gifted assessment, grammar assessment, school climate, and BOE training, excluding the pay for play. Again, I think we agreed the total was $113,868.
And that's a motion that we've already acted on.
Right. But I had a different suggestion of what we can change.
That's another amendment. She wants to
Another
make a
amendment
different
as
motion.
opposed to the busing.
She wants to make a different motion.
Okay. Are you trying to make a motion on the same items and just finding a different way to pay for it?
Exactly.
That's what you're trying to do.
That's what I've been trying to do for an hour.
Okay.
Because the busing seems to be a heated issue.
I mean, I'll go to the board.
I was just waiting for Mr. Patton to
Yeah,
finish.
I'll go to the board. I mean, there's, how many variations of a motion do you want to do, saying, okay, I want these back, and if you don't want to pay for it this way, how about if we try and pay it for another way, and then if we don't like that way, then how about a third way?
Isn't that what you do with a budget?
Can I finish my statement? At some point, the board would have to give me guidance as to how they want this conversation to continue, because each board member is allowed to make a motion, just that if they become redundant motions to the basic tenet of the board at the moment, we're, going in circles.
I find the program, well, I find the program adds valuable, so I would be willing to entertain Ms. Carnell's motion. That's my guidance.
The division question, Ms. Carnell was next, and then you're going to go next, and then the division question will come last. So if you wish to make a motion, make a motion. Ms. Carnell.
Right, I think 3 board members left the table. And it was even before I said something.
Yeah.
So,
Well, then they lose their vote.
Nature calls for everybody at some point in time. So I think if we can get the motion on the table, then, because we still have a quorum, if we can get the motion on the table as I read it to make sure every board member understands where we are, the 3 will be back here.
I think we nearly lost another one. Okay.
So.
No more drinking at the table.
To advance the
So-
meeting. So
Okay,
what
so
items
this
do you wish to add?
Okay, I listed what I'd like to add back and what I wanted to discuss, and
No, I need to. Okay, but I need to clarify so that,
okay, so,
is it the same 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 items that Ms.
Yes.
Lou McCormick wanted to add?
Yes.
At the same budget numbers?
yes.
Okay,
I
and-
just clarified that,
right.
113,800.
Your offset is?
Okay, so this is what I was trying to say. My offset is, and to Mr. Patton about the technology, I totally agree with you that, technology changes.
Please make the motion. and
Okay,
then
my
debate.
motion is that we do away with the projectors of $113,868. So how many projectors we need to do away with to cover that number?
It's projection systems.
Okay, so reduce the tech capital line by $113,868 with the idea that some certain number of projection systems will not be installed.
That's correct.
Okay. So, do I have a second for that motion?
I'll second it.
Ms. Lou McCormick seconds it, so please make your argument. Sorry to put the motion on the table and then argue, but that is the process.
I would like to make my argument with the other two board members return, because it's going to be very hard to vote on something if they're not here.
We'll take a 5-minute recess. Okay, so now we're back to order. So while members were availing themselves of the facilities, I did ask Ms. Carnell to put a motion on the table so that at least we would have it on the table. I apologize if that putting it on the table while there were 2 or 3 people missing was an affront to you. I did not mean it that way. I was just trying to practically move things along. The motion that Ms. Carnell put on the table is the same 6 items that were acted on in the prior motion, which is the middle school gifted enhancement of $40,000, the 5th grade music at $34,000, the gifted assessment at $22,700, the grammar assessment at $97.68, $5,000 on the climate line item, and $2,400 for the Board of Ed. Her change is to cover that $113,868 entirely out of the capital technology, with the idea that a certain number of the projection systems would not be purchased based on the judgment of the district as to which classrooms would not get them anymore. And there was a second for that motion, and so please now make your argument.
Thank you.
And again, I do apologize.
And I appreciate that. Thank you. I just thought it would be easier if everybody heard it at the same time. Through the chair to Mr. Patton, as you made a comment earlier, and I totally agree with you about how important technology is, because I see where my children are today with their technology as opposed to where I am. And it's an ongoing, it's a constant in terms of technology. But I think when we look at other issues that need to be either taken out or brought back into this budget, there has to be some places that give. And I think the projectors are probably one of the best ways in terms of the technology, and that's why that's my suggestion. We have to, it's a give and take. And unfortunately, I think the projectors are something maybe some of these children can do without at this time. So.
Ms. Lou McCormick, you seconded it, right? So you have an opportunity, and then I'll go to the balance of the board.
Really, I prioritize these student programs. I value technology. We're very heavy into technology in our family. But I think the trade-off is valuable in that, you know, the superintendent and his staff can use their judgment to minimize impact. You know, clearly, perhaps some of the younger grades may not be as heavily impacted as, you know, high school, middle school, maybe even 3 through 5. So we have some discretion as to minimize the impact on, you know, students who don't need them pressed back and students who, you know, don't need them to actually do their work on. So I would support that, because I would prioritize student programs over something like this that actually does have some discretion around it.
Thank you. Mrs. Gerber.
Yeah, I guess through the chair
Followed
to
by Mr. Patton.
To Dr. Title. I just wanted to get some clarification on exactly how, I know how this would work. I know Ms. Cornell specifically mentioned the projection systems. Would that be what you would do, or would it be up to Mrs. Byrne to decide that it should come from somewhere else? And if it came from the projection systems, exactly who would that impact and how would it impact them?
I don't know. I mean, you know, it's a board that, I'll just express a little frustration here, then I'll answer your question. You know, we've given you stuff sometimes, and you want to make, you know, you're worried about making major changes because you haven't had 2 weeks to study it, or a week to study it, or whatever it is. And then at midnight, you know, we're talking about a major impact to something that just flies in, and I'm supposed to figure out the impact of that. It's very hard to do. My general feeling is that we have underinvested in technology capital. We continue to have to defer on that. We particularly had to defer on it this year already. The projection units, we're not talking about like overhead projectors. We're talking about something that is essentially a substitute for the smart board so a teacher can use it as a teaching device in the class for the benefit of all the children. It is something that is in the board's plan. It's actually a more cost-effective way of bringing projection systems into the classroom than a smart board. Maybe there's some staff that want to weigh in on this, on how they're used. Karen, do you want to address it? And I don't know, since elementary appears to be the target here, maybe other people want to weigh in on it, and talk about it. I think I've already addressed the other issues, so I'm not going to go back over the the ground. I think I just want people to understand the importance of the technology to the school system. It's not all SBAC.
Mrs. Parks.
So we have the 3-year technology plan, and we have been working with the schools for them to tell us what they believe to be the minimum requirements that they need in their classroom in terms of technology. The elementary schools have really continued to be fitted out with smart boards thanks to the PTAs. They've been purchasing them, and we're really in good shape in the elementary schools, and we are using the PTAs to continue to support that and putting in projection systems without the smart board where we can. The real area of need for the projectors, the projection systems, is the secondary level, which we've been trying to fulfill those classroom needs. So probably the secondary schools would be more impacted than the elementaries if we were to cut back on the projection systems.
Does that answer your question, Mrs. Gerber?
Yeah, thank you. I'm not going to support this. I've been on the board for 2.5 years and have seen technology not been fully funded. Before that, I sat in the audience for years. I know we're behind in technology. I think to put us further behind is not going in the right direction. I totally respect the looking at different options, but I just feel this is something that I just can't support.
Any other comments from the board? Mr. Patton?
If a member had put a motion forth that said, I want to cut technology by half or a third or whatever this is, I've got the numbers here, and I want to reinstate the full world language program that we had several years ago, that's a motion that I'd be hard-pressed to make a decision on. This is not hard-pressed. This is adding back a music program that we cut, that we heard from a host of administrators and teachers, albeit not the music teachers, of course, that touted how much better that the instructional time and that the students were learning with that extra few minutes back. Adding to programs like the middle school gifted program, while is a wonderful idea, we're here tonight to find budget adjustments, not to add things back in, especially things that we talked about back in January. If the projector budget is cut by $113,000, the budget was only $294,000, so that's almost half. So right here in the budget book, it says there are 68 classrooms that currently have no multimedia projector. So that's 27, 28 projectors, 27, 28 classrooms that will now not have a multimedia projector. So yet again, PTAs are going to have to, if they want more equality in their school and they want to help their teachers teach, parents are going to have to go, suck up that kind of money through the PTAs. And we're arguing about, $75 or $200 for pay to play. This makes absolutely no sense. And again, I won't support it. I appreciate the motions to add things back in there are important, but again, I won't do it at the expense of technology.
Thank you. Other comments from the board? Yes, Ms. Lou McCormick, can I go to the public after Ms. Lou McCormick's presentation? Yes.
I have a question. Are we, I mean, what kind of discretion do we have to move our resources around the district? Between schools, between grades, et cetera?
What resources specifically are you?
The technology. So smart boards, projection systems.
It's very expensive to have the smart boards installed, so once we install them in a classroom, we don't like to move them. Same thing with the projectors, because they have, depending on the layout of the classroom, there's a distance that they have to be from the board, and there's an installation cost with every one of those, so we don't, in general, move them around once they're installed. And we have some spare projectors for on a cart, but in the classroom we like to have them installed because they're in the ceiling and they're out of the way and there aren't cords running around the classroom. So once they're installed, we leave them where they are, generally.
But we actually have some that are on carts, so as they need them, they can be brought into the classroom and used when needed, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And there is discretion, should we want to permanently move from one classroom to another, that we could do that if we find that there's a greater need in one classroom versus another.
I think
I
Mr.
think
Hatch just wants to jump in on this. That doesn't solve the problem.
But I think she already answered the question, that it rarely happens because of the costs involved and all the rest. Mr. Hatsett, you wish to make a comment? The headmaster of
Thank you very
one of our
much.
high schools.
I just, having lived this, just in this building alone, when we went through a major project to install digital projectors in the classrooms, one of the things that we found leading up to that project was when we had mobile projectors on carts, they presented safety situations in the classroom, because generally you have to run wires to the projectors that would run, through the middle of the classroom. And if you have a mobile classroom, you have students moving around in groups and whatnot, sometimes that became a safety issue. The other thing I would just add about the digital projectors, and this isn't a commentary on anything that it's being balanced against, just about the digital projectors themselves. Teacher has a computer. Every teacher has one computer assigned to them. They have to email parents. They have to enter their grades. They have to fulfill all of the aspects of the teacher evaluation program. But to say that there's no digital projector, which is basically the extension of that teacher's computer onto a board so that the students can see, it's like saying to the teacher, don't use your computer to teach students. So, we can't stream videos to, teach them difficult concepts like showing meiosis and mitosis, at the atomic level. We would not be able to put up an Excel spreadsheet to show the effects of a formula. So, I mean, just on and on and on. There's like a million examples, and I can just say, almost every single classroom I walk into, the digital projector is on. Teachers are using it for instruction. Save discussions or, literature discussions or things like that. But basically, I mean, they are used nonstop for the purpose of the benefit of our children. So I find them a tremendous resource, and I know every teacher does too.
Thank you. We'll go to the public. You would have one last comment? Ms. Lou McCormick?
Do we need to go to public first
Well,
or finish? Or?
That's what I was about to do, go to the public.
Oh, no, I have one more
But you
comment.
raised your hand.
Yes, I do. I have one more comment. So,
Did you want to comment?
two items. One is that I appreciate, and I actually really do appreciate, that we do need systems and technology inside the middle school in particular and the high school. And I would say that it's probably a cheaper alternative to move some of these whiteboard, smart boards or projector systems away from perhaps grades that don't need them or don't use them as heavily or rely on them as heavily for learning, such as ones that are still focused on just developing gross motor skills or fine motor skills, that we have that flexibility, and probably the cost of doing so is a fraction. And the other thing is that I would say that, as Mr. Patton pointed out, that with technology, we can, fortunately and unfortunately, rely on the generosity of the PTAs to help provide that. Unfortunately, with the programs that we're trying to bring back, even if the PTA is willing to pay, we can't put that in place. It's out of our reach. Programs are so important, and this is why I understand the desire for technology. We can try to satisfy our technology needs, I think, in creative ways so that we minimize the impact. But the programs and the teachers and the time and the dedication for a curriculum and organizing, that is irreplaceable. That's what we rely on the schools for. The technology, again, is a facilitation for excellent teaching, but if we don't even have the program in place, that to me is, again, a priority. I prioritize the programs above the technology that facilitates it, particularly when we have the capacity to be able to move our technology around to optimize it for the students who need it the most.
Thank you. Ms. Cornell, normally after going to the public, I would come back to the maker of the motion to see if they want to make final comments. Do you want to comment now or after the public? Okay, so we'll go to the public. So, but just before we go to the public, while you're moving up there, I'll ask unanimous consent to extend the meeting beyond 11 o'clock. Extend the meeting before 11 o'clock. I see no objections, so by unanimous consent, the meeting is extended beyond 11 o'clock. Now we go to the public. Please state your name and address.
My name is Brenda Anziano. I'm the principal of Riverfield Elementary School. I just want to make a statement about the projectors at the elementary level. I have been in the district for 10 years, and I have had the wonderful support of PTAs at both Dwight Elementary School, which is fully outfitted at this point in time with overhead projectors and smart boards, and at Riverfield Elementary School, which I've been at for 2 years, where the PTA has put all of their extra funding into helping get Riverfield to be a little bit more equitable to other schools in the district. We've been waiting for this at the elementary level for a long time. I agree with Mr. Hatzis, and it's no different at the elementary level than it is at the high school. Asking a teacher to teach without this kind of technology is like asking them to not teach to teach without their computers. And every teacher uses their computers every day for things, and the overhead projectors are things that are vital to equity in the elementary schools and to move our student achievement forward. One of the things that's happening at the elementary level that's been happening for a long time is projectors on carts. And it's an extremely unsafe environment for children where we have a cart in the middle of a room and we've got wires running everywhere in order for us to have projection units. So I speak for all the elementary principals, that many of them were here earlier. We really hope that you will support this and not cut this again. We've been waiting for this. It's been in a 3-year plan that was supposed to be done in 2012. And this year we thought we had it, and I hope we really have it. Thank you for your support.
Thank you very much. Please state your name and address.
I'm Eileen Roxy, the principal at Roger Sherman. I just want to reiterate what Mrs. Anziano spoke about. Our PTAs have fully funded the smart boards and projectors at Roger Sherman School. To have them taken out and moved would be a horrible experience for not only the parents who raise the money, but the children and the teachers that depend on using them every day. I believe that there was a discussion about how it's not important in the lower grades. It is absolutely vital in the younger grades. Kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third, fourth, fifth. They are interactive. Children are using them, touching them, interacting with knowledge. And it's a wonderful thing to see. They are used every single day in every classroom. One of the things that Ms. Anziano spoke about is all of the cables on the floor. We were actually, when we had our walkthrough with the fire department, they were very unhappy with the situation and the way the carts were set up, and they are interested to see how this is going to be fixed. So for safety measures, for validating the work and the support of the PTAs for technology in our schools, I would just support Dr. Title in keeping this in our budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Please state your name and address.
Eric Newman, 85 Eastfield Drive. PTAs are not banks, and they are not ATM machines. To continue relying on PTAs to fund technology is not right. Every school, every community is different. Some schools are able to fundraise and give to smart boards to the schools. Other schools can't. Last year, my son was in 5th grade, came home on the first day. Daddy, Mommy, guess what? What, Jacob? I have a smart board in my classroom. The first time. What, you know. So just think about that. And some schools have them, other schools don't. And to put the pressure on the parents who are already struggling in our community to continue fundraising, to put a smart board in something that should be the most basic educational tool in our school system should be funded by the Board of Education, by the town, not by the parents.
Thank you very much. There's a race to the, and the lady with the boot actually won. Please state your name and address.
Lisa Havey, 216 Longview Avenue. I'm going to piggyback on what Eric said, and I'm going to speak on behalf of PTA Council, where I am happily the past president, currently serving for another year. It is against national policy and state policy, and it's not supported that PTAs purchase and supplement technology for any school for any reason. I shouldn't say any reason, there are some reasons, but none of which have been addressed here. It is the job of the school board to provide all materials necessary to teach your curriculum. That's your job, not the parent's job, not the PTA's job. You have created so much inequity among the schools. It's so nice that Riverfield and Sherman have all their smart boards. Isn't that great? Because their PTAs are rather wealthy. They can do that. Not all PTAs can, and it has really created a have and have not situation, and you are not teaching a fair curriculum across the schools. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. Please state your name and address.
Hi, good evening. Kristen Tharrington, 79 Walden Court. I am the outgoing president of the Riverfield PTA, and I would like to say that for the past several years we have had an initiative to try to supplement our school with technology. And we have had philosophical debates on whether or not that is the appropriate thing to do. But we did feel that our school was lacking in this area, specifically with respect to smart boards. I'm a layperson when it comes to education, but I can tell you, being in the trenches the past few years on the executive board, there's a marked difference in what's going on in the classrooms as far as those that are able to utilize this technology. There's just to see the children using these smart boards, to see the teachers using these smart boards, the things that they do are amazing at the lower grade levels. We have a family math night, family math and technology night, and when those younger children get into those classrooms with the smart boards, they are up there, they're engaged, they are so eager to use them. And I would like to speak that beyond the logistics that have been discussed, it would be frustrating to feel that there is a tacit agreement that we know that when we purchase technology it becomes the property of the district, but I do think there would also be a sense of frustration to feel like the technology that we have worked so hard to purchase would be reallocated or redistributed. And I wish that we weren't in the situation where, PTAs that can afford it can get it. I wish there was equality for all, and I do know, though, not all of our classrooms are equipped with projection units. We're probably one of those 67. So
thank you very much.
Thank you.
State your name and address.
Christine Vitale, 254 Vernon Hill Road. I'm going to ask that you do not support this. We talk so much about having a plan. This has been in the plan for years. We've been deferring it due to past budget reductions. I think that technology is something that all children access. We talk about wanting equality across the district. Can't think of anything more than making sure that all children have equal access to technology. I understand the need to want to reinstitute something like the gifted program at the middle school, but I think we can't rely on the PTAs also. I am the president at almost past president at the Roger Little Middle School, and we're fundraising now, but right now we're not looking to be putting more technology into the middle school. We view that as your job. The fundraising we do, we want to use for other programs. So I'm going to ask you again not to support it, and just I support the comments made by the elementary school principals and the PTA presidents. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please state your name and address.
Suzanne Miska, 123 Rygate Road. I know I can't do point of clarification, but could somebody please explain to me, because somewhere along the line the signals have gotten crossed. At the Board of Ed budget presentation on the projectors, I thought the presentation went along the lines that these were earmarked for elementary schools. Now I'm hearing they're earmarked for secondary schools, so I'm a little confused as to what it is that we're doing here, because
which are they being earmarked for? It's a little question. The other part of this equation is I find it funny that we, and in no disrespect, as I have a high schooler, obviously I'm focusing in that direction, but you know, we have a need for laptops for world language in high school that we've got 50 being cut, and I can tell you that the cart, when it rolls in, most of them don't work. So if I'm going to have to make a decision, the thought that we have to put a smart board for a kindergarten class versus high school, you know, laptops for world language, I don't know what we're talking about. The other point I want to make, and in fairness, the administration has politely supported the PTA's funding of this technology. I have had numerous comments because as a member of the PTA and not the president of Fairfield Ludlow High School, just to clarify, the concern was just trying to get something for a teacher, and it was turned down because it was viewed as technology, and I was told that you can buy a smart board, but you can't buy something else. So if you're going to have this policy where PTAs are allowed to do this, you've set yourself up for this kind of inequity. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please state your name and address.
Hi, Jill Vargas, Pilgrim Lane. I just want to say I'm really disheartened by the comment that technology isn't necessary for the younger grades. I have a second grader in Sherman School. She's excellent in math this year, and I think it has to do with just how engaged she is, what goes on in that classroom. That smart board is on, and she is busy. And when she comes home and she shows me what she can do, my jaw drops, because it's an amazing sight to see. And to say that kindergartners, first graders, second graders don't need technology, it's absurd. It's disheartening and it's disappointing. Members on this board are on this board to advocate for our kids, all of our kids, K through 12. That's a silly, silly statement. Thank you.
And just before you come up, I would just also remind the crowd that comments that may seem as though they're directed at individual members are not accepted, so please make your comments within that rule. Thank you.
Steve Baker, 22 Charles Street. I would ask you not to support this motion. I think that adding gifted programs back in without the technology to support it is putting the cart before the horse. I also just want to make a brief statement saying that if in order not to be redundant, I still would like to have Dr. Title's proposed cuts added in as they were proposed. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a technology adjustment here?
Yeah.
Okay. It's one of the few times Jerry actually puts himself in front of the camera. Please state your name and address.
Kevin Chase, principal at Mill Hill. My colleagues have done a fine job articulating the rationale for these projection systems. But one thing I want to say is that I keep hearing this over and over about technology. We need to integrate technology. We need to support technology. And in my opinion, one of the problems that we have is that we continue to view technology as a separate entity. You don't go through your day thinking about how could I incorporate this in my day. It's seamless. It's in your day. It's in our kids' lives. It's not about how can we force these projectors into the curriculum. It's the curriculum needs these projectors. These children need these projection systems. This is their life. This is how they learn. This is what they're engrossed in. It's as simple as that, really, in my opinion.
And is this the last speaker on this particular motion? I don't see anybody. I see one other person standing up. Please state your name and address.
Good evening. I'm David Hudspeth. I'm an instructional improvement teacher and gifted resource teacher at Osborne Hill School. And I'm in a fortunate position where I get to work very closely with the staff at Osborne Hill. And I serve on the technology committee. And as I ask teachers what they most want that would help them on a daily basis, it is projection and the ability to show what they need to on the screen. This isn't just something that's rolled out to show video occasionally. This is something that's used on a day-to-day basis in all of our subject areas. And it's used for instruction of whole class. It can be used in small groups. It allows the teacher to pick up where they left off on a previous day. This is not just something that's brought in to show a video, every once in a while. When we run into the problem of trying to share projection units, the problem is everyone wants them at the same time. Everyone wants them constantly. And we have teachers that have the mobile projection units set up, and it's not something that gets rolled out of the way because it's used so frequently. It stays where it is, and so we end up with cords, multiple cords for each cart going, through where kids should be sitting or in order to see the board. So I hope that helps clarify how it's used at the elementary level. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And please state your name and address.
Bonnie Rotelli, 1280 Merritt Street. I ask that you do not support this motion, and I ask that you pass the budget cuts as presented by Dr. Title. I heard it mentioned in a previous meeting about the need for the technology at the higher grades as opposed to kindergarten, specifically something to do with blocks and pencil grips, but I'd like to say I'm familiar with the kindergarten curriculum, and my kindergartner is reading, writing, doing math, and did a wonderful multimedia presentation on polar bears. So it is needed in all grades, and I ask that you do not support this motion.
Thank you. Now back to the last speaker. Please state your name and address.
Dejana Fanar, 57 Riverside Drive. Again, I'm grateful for your time and considerations. I wanted to bring this notion of diverse learners because one of the things is I think it's important not to divide children or talk about selecting children, whether a child is a high school kid or middle school kid or an elementary kid. I actually have all of my 3 children are all over the spectrum. I have a high school kid, I have a special needs kid who is in elementary, I have a pre-K child as well. And what I want to say is that diverse learners need various ways to learn. And one of them, for instance, is certain projectors that teachers need. I have a child with special needs who is a visual learner, and exceptionally gifted intellectually. However, certain approaches, traditional approaches, don't work. So we need to make certain adjustments. And we do. And I think teachers do that. And they use that in the classrooms. I think it's important to remember how we can educate children, diverse learners, using various methods, methodology. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Back to the board, and Ms. Cornell, do you have any final comments?
Thank you. First of all, there's been quite a few comments about passing Dr. Title's budget. And when I started my comment, I said that this was a very well thought out, very difficult cuts to make. And I'm sure it wasn't easy for Dr. Title. But there's always room for changes or other thoughts that might not have come up. And in terms of the suggestion of this technology, first of all, I want to say that I think the PTA, I only know some of the schools have done an outstanding job, whether they fund money for technology or not. In terms of the technology, as parents said, how well educated and how helpful it is for students, their children to learn, or have they learned from the technology. Part of the things that we're trying, what I have put a motion out to put back, is also for the children to learn. I have, and I can only speak for myself, even though these emails have been addressed to the board members, how many parents have reached out and said, you have to put music back into the curriculum. How could you do that? Parents, so many parents stood up here and said how wonderful and how much their children learn. Well, what about taking that to the next level by restoring the gifted program? Teaching children how to, speak with proper grammar. They can't always use their computers to learn that. Sometimes they're going to be in a place where they don't have their computer. This is not one for the other. Unfortunately, we have limited dollars, and that's all that can be spent. And technology has changed the world, but I know there's many times I also say to my kids, get off the computer. So.
Thank you. With no further comments, we'll go to the vote. The motion in front of us is to add $113,868 to the budget for the middle school gifted enhancements, $40,000, fifth grade music, $34,000, gifted assessments, $22,700, grammar, $97,68. On the climate line, add $5,000, and BOE, $2,400, with the offset being capital technology aimed at the projector systems. Do the board members fully understand the motion in front of them? If so, all in favor, raise your hand. Mrs. Lou McCormick, Ms. Carnell, Mr. Llewellyn, all opposed. Mr. Convertito, Mrs. Gerber, Mr. Dwyer, Mr. Fattabine, Mrs. Maxon Kennelly, Mr. Patton. The motion fails 3-6. What's next?
I move to call the question, Mr. Chair.
It's moved and seconded. A motion to call the question is not debatable. I think prior to Ms. Carnell's motion, I had already said unanimous consent to divide the motion, so I think that that's still the intent of this board, to divide the motion into, if we're calling the question, we're calling two questions. One is the whole list, absent the eliminate one pre-K bus, and the eliminate one pre-K bus would be a separate and distinct motion. So we're calling the question from that perspective because the board's already agreed to divide the question. So with no debate allowed, that requires a 2/3 vote, which is 6 votes. All in favor of calling the question, please raise your hand. Mr. Convertito, Ms. Carnell, Mrs. Gerber, Mr. Dwyer, Mr. Fattabine, Mrs. Maxon Kennelly, Mr. Patton, all opposed. Mrs. Lou McCormick abstains. Which one? Abstain. So the motion passes 7-1 and 1. So we're on to the main motion, which will be two main motions, and that the Board of Education approve the superintendent's recommended budget adjustments for 14-15, absent the eliminate one pre-K bus is the motion that is on the table. Calling the question means that we move immediately to the vote, and while the public has had a chance to speak on a variety of topics during this night, I would be remiss if I didn't go to the public and say, one last shot. Anybody need to speak? Can I perhaps hope that on behalf of everybody in the room you are speaking?
Probably wouldn't like that. I know most of the room. It's not going to go in my favor. Suzanne Miska, 123 Rygate Road. I get it. It's late. We've seen this exact procedure done last year at exactly about the same time. I get it. I really do wish, 2 years ago at an August meeting in this exact same school, the chair of this Board of Ed currently raised a really great comment, which was, the budget process needs to happen earlier so that all our discussions and debates can take place, so that we can have the debate that so many of you and what you have attempted to do this evening can take place in a timely fashion, in a fashion that allows for the discord that this board really needs to have in regards to education. I mean, we've listened to the discord through the Board of Finance, the Board of Selectmen, and the at length discord through the RTM. And while I appreciate that time is of the essence, and maybe we are at the end of everything we can possibly do, and I will say this with all deference that, the list in front of you, is a lot better than I've seen in the last 3 years, and I'm most appreciative to see it that way instead of any programs being cut, although I really would have loved to have seen music get back in if it could have. I would have loved to see the laptops for world language, because I know that technology is struggling profusely if it's doing it at Ludlow. I'm sure it's doing it at Ward.
Yeah.
But I mean, I really hope that this board can implement something in procedure that would allow for this discussion to take place, allow for public input, and allow you all the chance to have this discussion and raise the questions and get the answers that you so need, and so the public needs. Thank you.
Thank you. So back to the board. There is two motions on the table. The list that is in front of you that the superintendent presented at the May 6th meeting that adds up to $1,304,000. If we take out the $42,521, the list would then be $1,261,479. Does our finance director agree with that math?
Yep.
Okay. So the motion before you is to the Board of Education approve the superintendent's recommended budget adjustments for 2014-15 at an amount of $1,261,479, and then we will take separate action on the pre-K bus line. Everybody understand the motion in front of you? Okay, all in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Mr. Convertito, Ms. Carnell, Mrs. Gerber, Mr. Dwyer, Mr. Fattabine, Mrs. Maxon Connelly, Mr. Patton, all opposed? Mrs. Lou McCormick, abstain?
You voted in favor.
You vote, I'm sorry, I didn't see enough hand action, I guess. Okay, thank you. So that's 8-1. The second motion that will be in front of us, again, is that the Board of Education approve the superintendent's recommended budget adjustment as shown on the transportation line, eliminate one pre-K bus at a savings of $42,521. So all in favor of, that's a separate motion, but it's not debatable. It's covered under the call to question. So is there everybody understand the motion that's in front of us to
Doesn't there
discuss
have
that?
to be an offset?
Not if you vote to cut it.
If you approve it, if we turn it down, then we have to find an offset. Correct. Yeah, because we do have to find $1,304,000. So if this motion does not pass, that means we then are $42,521 short, and we have to have continued discussion to figure out how to make up that piece of it. Okay? Yeah. So, all in favor that the Board of Education approve the superintendent's recommended budget adjustment as shown on the transportation?
Point of order here. Can you do back-to-back call to questions like this?
Oh, yes. Can I finish reading? The answer is yes. That's what my ruling was in the process of describing where we were as a board.
Can I defer to the two lawyers just to give their input?
Well, no.
If I may, please, it's,
No, the proper procedure, if you want to challenge a ruling of the chair, is to ask the board to overrule the chair, not to ask whether somebody else has a different viewpoint, whether they're lawyers or not.
Okay, challenge the chair then, and we'll get some input.
Okay, without debate, the ruling was that the calling the question was made after I had sought and received unanimous consent to divide the question, and so I explained to the board that we would treat these as two independent motions. Mr. Llewellyn objects to that, so I ruled that process was acceptable, and so all in favor of Mr. Llewellyn's objection, which would be to overrule my ruling, therefore not permitting this motion, raise your hand. Do you understand that if you want to overrule the ruling of the chair, you would have to vote yes in support of Mr. Llewellyn's objection? You understand?
Can I ask a point of order whether that appeal of the chair's ruling is debatable or not? Is there?
Do you wish to make debate?
Well, I just want to.
No, do you wish to make debate? I didn't see anybody else's hand raised, so do you wish to make debate on this? Okay.
I would.
Okay. So if you wish to overrule the ruling of the chair then you would vote yes on in support of Mr. Llewellyn's objection to the ruling that the closing the question was good for both motions as presented, one that we've acted on and one that we're about to act on. If you want to support the chair's ruling, then you would vote no. Everybody clearly understand yes versus no? Okay, all in favor of overturning the ruling of the chairs, raise your hand saying aye. Mr. Llewellyn, opposed? Mr. Convertito, Ms. Carnell, Mr. Dwyer, Mr. Fattabine, Ms. Maxon Kennelly, abstain. I have 2 abstentions, Mrs. Lou McCormick and Mr. Patton. So the motion is 162 rejected. So on to the main motion that the Board of Education approve the superintendent's recommended budget adjustment as shown on transportation, eliminate 1 pre-K bus for a savings of $42,521. If there's all clear on that, all in favor, raise your hand. Ms. Carnell, this is in support of this final one. Are you voting or? I didn't see you raise your hand.
Oh, I was going to vote.
This is...
Okay, so let's be clear. Okay, so let's be clear in case people are not clear. If we approve this, then we have completed our task for the night and found $101,304,000. If we do not approve this, if we vote no on this, then we have to stay at work and find $42,521 from some other source.
So we're voting to cut it.
We're voting to cut it.
We just separate it, but it's still voting to cut it.
It's voting to cut it per the superintendent's original recommended. We just separating the motion.
But if we want to have discussion, we need to vote it down and then have discussion and then bring it for vote again, or are we not allowed to bring it for vote again?
No, you'd vote it down and then you'd have continued discussion on how to find $42,521.
Understood, but we're not being given the opportunity to actually speak about this right now. So if we vote it down, can you then bring it back for the same vote to vote it down? Because you can't vote the same thing twice, can you?
No, you can't.
Okay, so that's kind
So
of the question.
that's I'm just trying to get some clarification on this. So basically, if this is voted down, then we have to find something else, but we don't know what that something else is, I guess is my question. So there is no discussion taking place before we vote.
The question's
Right,
been
the
called.
question was called.
Question's been called. And so if we want to support the superintendent's recommendation for this cut, we vote yes. If we want to find a different source for this $42,521, we vote no. Is there clarity? Is there clarity? Okay.
Point of order,
Yeah.
Mr. Chair. Can't a person who votes in favor bring a motion to reconsider?
Yes, a person
So you
voting in
can't,
favor of
so
it
you
could
can't
vote-
essentially vote on it twice.
Yeah, but you could, at the same meeting, you can vote to reconsider.
So a person who votes in favor of it,
Could bring it forward. You know, now, on the prevailing side, and if there is a prevailing side and this is already cut, well, then our task is done and there would be no purpose in, so the prevailing side would have to be a negative vote, I would think, just from practical purposes, that a majority of the board turns this motion down, and therefore the person who voted in the majority, after discussion, could bring this cut back up. Correct? Correct? Everybody understand that? Okay. The motion before us is that the Board of Education approve the superintendent's recommended budget adjustment for 2014-15 as shown on the transportation, eliminate 1 pre-K bus for a savings of $42,521. A vote yes is in favor of the superintendent's recommendation. A vote no is not. All in favor, please raise your hand. Ms. Lou McCormick, Ms. Carnell, Mrs. Gerber, Mr. Dwyer, Mrs. Kennelly, Mr. Patton, all opposed? Mr. Convertito, Mr. Fattabine, Mr. Llewellyn, the motion passes 6-3. So that line item is accepted as well, and so we do have $1,304,000 in budget reductions done. I'm going to suggest that we defer the balance of the agenda, if that is acceptable to people. I would like to just make one or two comments. One is that we've received our letters on the FEA and the FSAA contract negotiations. I will be the liaison for the FEA. Mr. Patton will be the liaison for the administrators. Number two, at the next meeting, you'll see a different table arrangement. I've talked with Jerry to see if you might work for both him and us. So we'll do that, and we'll see where things go. And at the moment, it appears as though the teacher evaluation will probably show up on the June 24th calendar based on the timetable of what the state has done.
I'll have it now.
Huh?
We gave it out.
Yeah, and so you have it in front of you in terms of what will be the original changes that people wanted, people being the state, and the second level of changes that the state wanted. It's all consolidated into this one document, and this document, absent another memo from the state between now and the 24th, will be the one that we act on. So please feel free to add it. With no further business coming before us, is there?
Can I have one brief open comment?
Please do.
And that is that because the discussion was called, I didn't get to raise one last issue, but just in deference to the people who I'd spoken to who had raised this issue to me, to ask that it be brought up, I do want to point out that the topic of restoring world language and possibly even extending it to the lower grades, like grades 1, 2, and 3, needs to be on our agenda. It's a very important item. I know it's coming up for discussion next year, and I know it all takes time, and I feel the longer that we wait to discuss items like this and bring them forth, the more students miss out. And so I urge the board to, again, not forget about this, and if we could please make it a point to discuss not only the concept of restoring world language to 6th grade, but perhaps bringing it down into the lower grades, because early introduction is so important with languages, and if we're really striving for 21st century, we cannot just be living in English. We must be expanding and consider ourselves global citizens.
Okay, thank you very much. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Mr. Patton, followed by Mrs. Gerber. Do all raise your hands? Do I have a hand going up, or do I have to take a roll call vote?
You're good.
Okay, we're unanimous. Thank you very much for your patience and understanding.